Welcome in. It is a kind of a rainy, kind of yucky day here at Social Taco, but we're here to brighten your day.
Yes, we are.
Join us from 10 until 2. The door's open here at Social Taco at 11 o'clock. We've got so much to get into. We have got basketball to talk about. Auburn and UAB get a big win last night as they continue non-conference play. And then, meanwhile, we have a situation where we're going to talk a little bit about the college football playoff rankings that will come out tonight. Heather Dinich, I was watching her this morning on ESPN. We talked about that yesterday where she had the rankings where she thinks it's going to fall out, and that's good news for Alabama and the SEC. It's very heavily SEC-laden, but one thing's for sure tonight, there's going to be some fan bases, Langell, that's going to be pretty upset, irritated about what it's going to look like.
Yeah, the biggest questions for me, where do they put BYU? Where do they put Tennessee now after the loss, a 2-loss Tennessee, and then was Georgia? Obviously, we're going to be paying attention to the value. We don't think Alabama's going to lose any value. If anything, Alabama probably moves up in this week's rankings. Going to be fascinating to see where the committee stands on some of these teams. As you know, unlike the election, we won't get into the election, but you had debates. We get debates every Tuesday night, and the cool thing about it is we get changes every single Saturday. And stuff that happens, like a BYU losing at home to a Kansas, and what we got in Athens, Georgia, and we'll continue to get that. But we got some big games coming up. But interesting to hear what Ward Manuel has to say tonight on the broadcast.
So ESPN is projecting, and these are projections. They claim that they do not see the rankings until we see the rankings. At least that's what Reese Davis tells us every Tuesday night.
Do you believe that?
I know this is going to come as a surprise to you, but I believe them.
It actually does come as a surprise to me, but okay. Continue your thought. We'll come back to that.
Heather's got Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana 5, Notre Dame 6. This is where it gets really interesting. Miami 7, Alabama, then Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, Boise State. That's according to Heather. But I have seen other projections where they have got Georgia ahead of Alabama, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, which interesting that they would put Georgia ahead of both Alabama and Ole Miss, the two teams that beat Georgia. But yeah, Georgia's got the big win against number 3 Texas.
Well, they've got the win over Texas, and they've got the win over Tennessee, which Alabama lost to head-to-head, and maybe that's how – there's, again, Pat, there's any way to support your argument if you're the college football playoff committee. Yeah. Now, it could contradict what you say later in the broadcast about another team because you change the criteria
right,
and the circumstances change. But I guess if there's intrigue, if you're just a college football fan and you like drama, we truly never really know where a team or where some of these teams are going to land. I don't think we have any doubt who's going to be number 1 this week, but where some of these other teams in the middle, or how they come to this team is number 13, this team is number 14 because of this team is number 10. It makes it for any entertaining television. It's going to be, I think, a frustrating night for Tennessee Vol fans.
I think you're right. I really do. We're going to talk to Mike Griffith coming up in just a couple of minutes. We'll get his take on the big Georgia win against those Tennessee Volunteers. Where does this put Georgia in his mind with the college football playoff as week 3 of the rankings will come out tonight? We'll go at 11 o'clock. We're going to go out to the state of Oklahoma. Tyler McComas, outstanding talk show host there in Norman, Oklahoma. We'll get his preview of Bama going on the road. Adam Rittenberg from ESPN.com, national college football writer. He'll join us at 12:30. David Waters covers the Florida Gators. All of a sudden, that's a more intriguing game as the Gators will be hosting the Ole Miss Rebels coming up this weekend. But we start off, like we do each and every Tuesday, the outstanding award-winning, just a good old guy.
Alabama native.
Born
in Mobile.
Although he went to a Big Ten school.
It's okay.
Mike Griffith from the AJC, covers the SEC, DogNation.com, joins us now on Three-Man Front. Mike, I hope you've had a really nice weekend and a good start to this week.
Oh, yeah, it's been great. Thanks.
Always good to see you and Paul Feinbaum together, like I saw y'all on Friday. I'm not really sure why you needed notes when you go on the Paul Feinbaum show, but you had them in front of you. So just in case Paul wanted to give you a little lip, you had backup. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I didn't even look at him once, but, he didn't really ask me any real questions about what the Big Ten selection committee would do with the rankings tonight.
Okay, before we get into the rankings tonight, let's go back. Just an outstanding performance all the way around of shutting Tennessee down, falling behind, but Carson Beck and that offense really got rolling. Just your takeaways from a very electric night for the Georgia Bulldogs against Tennessee.
Well, I mean, it was obviously a big win for Georgia, but, you know, if we're going to be real about it, Tennessee's not Alabama or Ole Miss when it comes to talent. I mean, they're a really good team that's playing really good football, but they don't have the star power yet. I mean, that team's growing. Nico's a redshirt freshman, you know, so you got to qualify it. I mean, right now I think Alabama and Ole Miss are the two best teams in the league, and Georgia's probably right there. You know, Texas, I think the jury's out just because, you know, they haven't beaten any top 25 teams. But it was big for Carson Beck to have that moment. And I do think it's a rallying point for Georgia. I think it's good they kind of have their version of Mercer, right? Alabama had the Mercer game. Georgia gets UMass before they play Georgia Tech to end the season, which is probably about as difficult a matchup as Auburn. I do think Alabama is going to be the team, the two-loss team that plays in the SEC championship game, and I do think that they'll beat Texas there. So that's kind of how I see the league falling. And, you know, I did see Lane Kiffin's comments. I wrote that Sunday that it'd be better for Georgia not to play in it, you know, just because of the risk-reward factor. You know, yeah, maybe you get a bye, but if you lose, you can get knocked out because of the trend, you know, that we've seen from the Big Ten playoff selection committee. And with four of the top 5 teams, I guess, are from the Big Ten, according to them. I'm not sure if that's ever happened historically, but according to their figurings and reckonings, and the way they do things, you know, last Tuesday I asked Ward Manuel, the Michigan athletic director and the chairman of the Big Ten championship selection committee, if they ever considered head-to-head matchups when they were doing the eye test, and he said no. And I said, well, what's the point of an eye test if you're not trying to measure two teams against one another? And how do you factor schedule strength? He just said this wasn't part of their protocol. So coming to you from the same league that changed the rules in the middle of the 2020 season to ensure Ohio State made the playoff, this is the way this committee's working. So you really can't risk another loss because they're saying that number of losses trumps value of wins. And I'm sure Kalen DeBoer sitting back there, you know, with his 4 top 25 wins saying, well, what's the point of playing a tough schedule if you're not going to be rewarded for it?
Mike Griffith joins us from the AJC, covers the SEC, DogNation.com as well. So you've got a very interesting perspective because you have been there, you've seen Texas, you've seen Alabama, you've seen Ole Miss, and you've said Tennessee. And you kind of touched on it at the beginning of the interview, but I want you to kind of go back to that for a second. If you were to rank those teams that Georgia played on that particular night, and based on the body of work that you've seen throughout the rest of the conference, what is that pecking order again of those 4 teams that I just mentioned? And then, of course, throw Georgia in that mix as well.
Yeah. So here's where it gets sticky for me, right? Okay. I think of those 4 teams, Alabama's the best. On the best, if everybody's at their best, I think Alabama's the best. But this is where it gets sticky for me because I do think there is something to the deserve element, right? And Texas, hypothetically, you know, it's hard for me to hand Texas a loss hypothetically and to rank Alabama ahead of them, having seen that game in Tuscaloosa last year and seen Texas and Steve Sarkisian, you know, win that football game. So it's hard for me to rank Alabama, and I know that was last year and this is this year, but you know, it's just flat out stupid to pretend that last year doesn't matter. Just like it's stupid for the Big Ten selection committee to ignore the fact that 4 of the last 5 national championships came out of a group of 14 teams, none of which are ranked in the top 6. And 10 of the last 20 championship game teams that played for the title came out of that group of 14 teams that are not ranked in the top 6. I mean, in a conference that in this previous 19 years produced more draft picks than any other league. It would be ignorant to ignore those factors, and yet still I understand that's the task they're charged with because it's supposed to be on a year-to-year basis, and you know they're supposed to not look at anything else, right? But this is not a court of law. We're not talking about a jury here in a murder trial. We're talking about something that should be common sense. But again, they put 13 of the smartest people together in the room, supposedly smartest people, and they make the dumbest decisions. And it's almost like they're falling over each other, you know, to be just, I don't know, what's the word, obstinate? I'm not sure. It's just, to the point now where we're questioning the validity of the SEC championship game. And that should not be the case. We should not be in a position, and I say we, I mean people that follow college sports, to second-guess the ability of a committee to put value on a conference championship game in the SEC. We really shouldn't. But I'm looking at who these refs are, and I guess, was Gary Pinkel ever really in the SEC? Wasn't he like the Missouri coach or something like that?
He was in the SEC championship game back-to-back years, Mike.
Yeah, well, obviously, he didn't learn enough when he was in the league or he's not carrying much weight. I don't know. Maybe he's at the end of the table, or he's the guy that goes and gets the sandwiches. I don't know. I know Carla Williams was at Georgia for a little while. I think she might be at Virginia now. But I'm just looking at their representation, and I'm trying to imagine the room. And that's another thing that's a shame. Why are we having to imagine this? Again, this isn't a murder trial here, although, some of these teams are going to get, well, I don't even want to joke about it. But the fact of the matter is, why aren't there conversations transparent? To me, if you want to be on a committee like that, you need to nut up and be willing to go public with your opinion. If you don't feel strong enough about your opinion to nut up and go public with it, then get off the committee. I don't like these closed doors discussions. I just don't. We don't need that. This is 2024. I mean, my God, our lives are on social media. Everywhere you go, there's people live streaming stuff. You're telling me we couldn't do a program and let these experts express their opinions, and then maybe us dummies down here, we're just so stupid that we don't understand why the Big Ten has 4 of the top 5. I really want to hear that discussion to validate an opinion that 4 of the top 5 best teams in the country come from the Big Ten. I want to hear that discussion, guys. I want to hear some Martian or somebody from the future explain what my human brain can't understand right now.
Mike Griffith, DogNation.com and the AJC joining us here on Three Man Front as we broadcast live from Social Taco. All of our guests join us on the Buyers Right Hotline. I'm all about the SEC like you are, Mike. Why is there not more of a national outcry about Texas? You look at Texas and their resume. They get a nice win, a 10-point win in Fayetteville last week. They get a 3-point win on the road in Nashville. The toughest test they've had, it was at home, and Georgia went in there and had their way with them. I understand an early season road win at Michigan and the perception of Michigan at the time, but look at Michigan now. Why is there not more of an outcry? I'm not saying they shouldn't be in the top 10, but why are they where they are right now and we're not hearing more opposition to it?
Oh, are we talking? You're asking me about Texas?
I'm asking you about Texas. Yeah.
Well,
is this based on preseason expectations? Is this ceiling?
I got asked
test?
about that last night on some San Francisco sports byline. And look, Indiana beat Michigan by 5 and Texas won by 3 touchdowns. So, Texas right now is a one-loss team. And because they're a one-loss team and they're in the SEC, they're viewed as the top SEC team. And I do this weekly SEC poll, and I ask everybody to rank, these teams, and everybody ranks Texas number 1 right now. Everybody on the poll ranks Texas 1. Alabama and Ole Miss are kind of split in the 2 vote. I think the poll comes out Thursday. Georgia's pretty much a 4. I think Texas gets the benefit of the doubt. I really do. I think it goes back to last year beating Alabama and Alabama. I think that win carries weight with people, but I don't really feel like Texas is really the strength of the argument. I think the strength of the argument is that there's a one-loss Penn State team that hasn't beaten anybody in the top 25, ranked ahead of a 2-loss Alabama team that's got 4 top 25 wins. That's where I would begin my debate.
Okay, I'll follow that up with this. If Texas A&M beats Texas at home in College Station, do you believe that Texas is still worthy of playing in the college football playoff?
Oh, I mean, it depends. It depends on how Tennessee plays against Vanderbilt. That'll be a common opponent for Tennessee and Texas to be measured against. It depends on how Ole Miss fares against Florida. There's plenty of football left to be played in that sense. But I think that if Texas were to beat Texas A&M and lose by 3 touchdowns to Alabama in the SEC championship game, I absolutely think they could be left out. I do think there are scenarios for Texas to be left out of the playoff, if that's what you're asking. Their schedule strength to this point hasn't really been enough of us to really evaluate how good Tech. We know they lost to Georgia at home convincingly. The good version of Georgia. The same one you saw the last three quarters against Tennessee and the second half against Alabama. But the rule of the day in the SEC is parity and depth and strength. And, this team on that day, I'm still trying to figure out how Alabama lost to Tennessee. I'm still trying to figure that one. Help me out with that, because I just got done telling you I didn't think Tennessee had Alabama's talent level, and yet they beat Alabama in Knoxville. So, maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe I caught the Vols on a bad day. I don't know. Or maybe the Georgia home field advantage is greater than people thought. But it's been that kind of league where it's kind of like, when do you play these teams? Kentucky beat Ole Miss earlier this year. Ole Miss beat South Carolina by 24. South Carolina humbled Texas A&M and, just slid past Missouri. Alabama beat Missouri. Of course, Missouri's quarterback didn't play most of the game against Alabama. But the point is, there's a lot of parity in the league, and with that parity, which I understand gets a lot of teams and programs excited and engaged, but comes unintended consequences. There's those unintended consequences again. That parity, from the SEC's perspective, those of us that have covered the league a long time are going, man, there sure are a lot of great teams. But from the Big Ten and the Big 12, this being a regional sport, they're going, wow, the SEC sure is mediocre with a lot of two-loss teams. It's all in the eye of the beholder. This is why Roy Kramer told me he did the BCS the way he did it. He said, the 1 year that he served, this was an interview I did with him a couple years ago. He said the 1 year he did the college basketball selection committee stuff was the most miserable year ever. It was 64 teams. It was miserable. He recognized that there was regional. I feel like I'm quoting some, Bible prophet here. He recognized that there was regionalism in college football and that we needed a system that would take opinion as much as possible out of it. So he set up the two human polls and the computer formulas to give you a predetermined formula for who would make the playoff, because he knew there would be inherent bias. And here we sit, however many years later, I guess 25 years, 26 years later since the start of the BCS in 98, with this council of supposedly 13 wise people determining the future of college football. And I literally just asked myself this question the other day. Are we really better off with this 13-member committee than we were in 1997, even before the BCS? Are we really better off at determining fairness and the health of college football when there were all these bowl winners and at times maybe even two champs? Because you might say there's one champ now, but we're going to look back and look at the seedings and say, wait a minute, the only reason this team won is because they didn't have to go through that team, or the scenario where a Miami team that could be ranked lower than the SEC team they play might get to play them in the Orange Bowl in their own home stadium because of the way these bowls are tied in. So to me, there's a lot of hand-wringing and consternation. The argument for that is, well, it's controversial and that makes it good. But I disagree. I don't want controversy and cheap thrills. I want fairness, and I want quality to be rewarded. And right now, the scales aren't tipping that way for me. Not when I see four Big Ten teams ranked in the top five. That is blasphemy.
And not to mention the fact, and I hate to pile on, but let's just say Indiana ends up losing, like many people think that they're going to lose this weekend to Ohio State, and they're going to finish the season. They're not going to have a win against anybody in the Big Ten that's going to finish above the bottom seven in the Big Ten. That's the problem that I have with it, and it goes back to when that stupid webinar that we were on, Mike, and you asked the question about transparency, about the strength of schedule, and they're not going to give us any info or any data points, and we can't figure that out because, once again, Indiana has no business, if they get absolutely skull-drugged this weekend by Ohio State, to be in over four SEC teams that is more deserving because they've played a tougher in-conference schedule.
Well, the books are already cooked. They've already done those first two set of rankings where Ohio State and Indiana are in the top five, so whoever loses is going to have a quote-unquote top five loss. They've already cooked the books. The damage is done. The damage is done. They have given us a baseline for schedules, their own schedule strength, based on their rankings. Trumps whatever computers out there that we haven't seen. They have told us that the Big Ten has four top five teams. So when these teams beat one another, they're going to be operating on a baseline that these were top five ranked teams. I expect Indiana to beat Ohio State, by the way, and then lose to Oregon. So I think all three of those teams will get in, as well as Penn State. I think that's exactly how it's going to go down. And I think it's interesting that the way the Big Ten scheduled to avoid, these teams playing one another versus how the SEC scheduled, which gives better ratings and theoretically should increase the value of the contract without maybe adding a ninth game. Maybe that's the genius of it. I don't know. But I do think there was a different strategy. Just like there was a different strategy for Big Ten expansion when, for cheap thrills, they added Rutgers and Maryland so they could expand their television footprint 33%, whereas the SEC, I thought, did so with more integrity by keeping their geographical footprint sound and adding Texas and Oklahoma. So there's two different strategies employed here. Right now the Big Ten is the dealer sitting at the end of the table, which may be a card up their sleeve here, and with this guy being the chairman, this Ward Manuel guy, and this committee that apparently he can railroad. I mean, I'm looking at these people. I'm looking like Rich Clark. Like, I admire this guy. I want to salute this guy. This is a 38-year Air Force veteran, and he's the one that told us that schedule strength would be, really important. But he's not in the room. He's just the executive director, right? He's the guy flying overhead in the B-52. But what's happening on the field with these field operatives is not good. Too much Agent Orange or something else in the room. I don't know, because the logic does not add up for me. And, you cannot – they're putting more emphasis on – bottom line, they're putting more emphasis on losses than they are quality wins and schedule strength. And that seems to be a very convenient logic for the Big Ten.
Mike, quickly before you go, do you believe that the committee, either consciously or subconsciously, whether they say it in that meeting room or not, in the back of their minds, they're thinking about keeping the Big Ten and the SEC happy because of that threat of them just taking the game and doing their own thing?
I think that to assume that there will be 13 people with equal input and equal power in one room would be just as ridiculous as assuming that a loss in the SEC is equal to a loss in any other Power 4 conference.
Okay.
There's always going to be a leader. There's always going to be a more persuasive person. There's always going to be backdoor conversations. There's always going to be self-serving narratives. Always. It's human nature. I still remember calling out, the Oklahoma AD on the selection committee in 2018 when everybody said, "Oh, how dare you challenge the integrity of these men?" When I said, how does Georgia get left off? They just played Alabama within a touchdown. Nobody else played two within 22 points. And Oklahoma's got one loss, Georgia's got two. Georgia's lost by a touchdown to, the most dominant regular season Alabama team in history. And how are they left? Oh, how dare you? How dare you challenge these men of integrity? Fast forward 2 years. Hey, did you hear what Oklahoma and Texas did? Yeah, it went behind the back of the entire league and snuck into the SEC. Oh, those men of integrity? Those men of great integrity, how dare we suggest they not do what's best for the betterment of everyone? Because that's what people do. Come on, let's wake up here. That's what people do. We really think we're going to take the human factor out of this by telling everybody, no, when you go in the room, you got to do what's best for college football. Can't hold any grudges, can't have any personal feelings, can't have any subconscious thoughts. Give me a break, man. Roy Kramer had it right. Roy Kramer knows. Can someone get Roy Kramer on the phone? Can he save the day? I think it's too late.
Mike Griffith, always entertaining, enlightening. Mike, enjoy the college football playoff rankings broadcast tonight. I'm sure that you'll be glued to your television we are.
I will be on the conference call with the Big Ten Selection Committee.
Don't disappoint us. Don't disappoint us on that.
Guys, it's not the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Let's get it right. It's the Big Ten playoff.
Oh, okay.
If that's the way they're going to roll, 4 out of the top 5 teams, guys. The Big Ten has 4 teams in the top 25. That's it. That's all they've got is 4, but they're in the top 5. And the SEC had how many? 9, something like that.
Yeah.
And none of the 14 teams that represent 4 of the last 5 national championships and 10 of the last 20 national championship game combatants, none of those teams are in the top 6. Oh, my God, they have just fallen off a cliff. Just overnight, they all went to hell. It's crazy. You know it's crazy. I know it's crazy.
Mike, always a pleasure, man.
Thanks, Mike.
Enjoy UMass this weekend.
Yeah, it'll be a great game. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike Griffith joining us. All of our guests joining us on the Buyers Right Insurance Hotline for all your insurance, financial, and HR needs. It's Buyers Right Insurance, a Higginbotham partner.
Wow, just so much to unpack. you can't disagree with anything
No.
that Mike just said. We'll get into that. We're live at Social Taco. This is Three Man Front on Jocks 94.5. It is 10:28, Jocks 94.5. We're live at Social Taco. It is rainy, kind of an ugly-looking day, but you know what? Great Mexican cuisine. A wonderful time can be had right here when the doors open up at 11 o'clock. Come by and see us. We're located on the second floor at the Taco Terrace. A little bit of news just came out about 20 minutes ago. The University of Texas and Notre Dame University, they have announced a home-and-home series between each other beginning in 2028 at Notre Dame. The following year, in 2029, it will be in Austin. So Texas and Notre Dame, a home-and-home series.
Great
so
helmet game.
Yeah, absolutely. So two prestigious programs, SEC and, of course, the major independent left in college football will get hooked up with each other on the 2028 and 2029.
You know, Mike Griffith, he made the reference to he feels like a biblical scholar. Boy, he brought the sermon today, didn't he?
Yeah, he certainly did.
Well, do you consider yourself to be a bourbon connoisseur? That's the question on everyone's mind today, because at Twin Peaks and Hoover, they are proud to offer you their exclusive and extensive collection of incredibly rare bourbons, whiskeys, and tequilas right there in Hoover. Plus, they have their barrel selects that are handpicked by the team there in Hoover at Twin Peaks and bottled just for you. So stop in all throughout the month of November at Twin Peaks and Hoover and see what they can pour for you. They also sponsor our daily poll question here on Three Man Front. And Molly, I believe today's question has a little bit to do with the Alabama Crimson Tide and the SEC Championship.
Oh, Oh, just a little. Is it worth the risk of not making the CFP to play for an SEC championship in Atlanta? Yes, it's all about the SEC title, or no, because the ultimate goal is the national championship. And right now, winning with 53% of our voters saying no because the ultimate goal is the Natty, with 47 saying yes, it's about the SEC title.
Very interesting. And when we come back on Three-Man Front, we're going to hear from Lane Kiffin. We're going to hear from the commissioner. We're going to kind of get into this a little bit. We'd love to hear from you. 1-800-239-WJOX, the Courtesy GMC text line is open at 205-834-9450. Interesting comments coming from around the SEC. You heard Mike Griffith. This is a jam-packed SEC CFP conversation right here on JOX 94.5. It is 10:34, JOX 94.5. We've already heard from Mike Griffith from the AJC. Tyler McComas, outstanding talk show host from Norman, Oklahoma. He's going to join us at 11. At 12:30, ESPN's Adam Rittenberg, national college football writer. He'll join us. Then at 1 o'clock, we'll go to Gainesville, Florida, find out what's happening with this program now. They're one win away, Landrum, from going bowling. How about that? You had Billy Napier. You had Sunbelt Billy losing and being fired.
Yeah, I mean, who didn't? Besides
kidding.
Billy Napier and
I'm just
maybe his kids. Look, for all of the scrutiny that was put not only on that schedule, but Billy Napier and his future at Florida, I will give him credit because he has kept that team together and they have come out.
They played hard.
And they have played hard all season long, and that's a credit to him.
Well, flu season is ramping up, so make your home healthier with Trane's Clean Effects Home Air Cleaner. It removes up to 99.9% of airborne particles, including those that cause virus, is 100 times more effective than standard air filters and 8 times more effective than HEPA room filters. So to go find a dealer near you, check out Trane.com.
Also, before we hear from Lane Kiffin in this conversation about being able to go and play in an SEC championship game or stay at home and just wait for the CFP, a little bit of news came out yesterday in regards to the point spread for the Iron Bowl, as our friend Brian Edwards, who will join the program tomorrow, he was the first one to post it, and then we reposted it. But FanDuel came out yesterday, and they installed Alabama as a 15.5-point favorite over Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Auburn is plus 520 on the money line, and the total is 52.5 points for the Iron Bowl. So that will fluctuate over the course of the next 7, 8, 9 days.
You'll get action on both sides.
Mm-hmm, no doubt.
And that's what they're trying to do. Now, if Auburn beats Texas A&M, I wonder the perception of Auburn, how much that will change. And I wouldn't guess that the line would move too much. But
and then if Alabama struggles on the road like they have against Oklahoma, then all of a sudden you know, we'll see how much it fluctuates. So you just heard Mike Griffith. And I love it. I'm going to start using it. I'm going to steal it from him. The Big Ten selection show tonight. That's what we're going to be watching instead of the CFP selection show. Well, yesterday, Lane Kiffin met with the media. Listen very carefully. This is what Lane Kiffin had to say about other coaches in the league and the mindset of being able to go play in Atlanta.
You know, it's changed. The conference championship, you know, could have a big impact both ways for people. So I've talked to other coaches, so I'll just kind of give you the feeling from some other coaches that, you know, they don't want to be in it. And, you know, the reward to get a bye versus the risk to get knocked out completely, that's a really big risk just to get a bye. So I think it's ended up being a very unique situation of all, you know, postseason sports, the way that system's set up there and how you could go to that and get knocked out. And if you don't go, you're in. I'm not a big gambler, but that's kind of one of them Vegas, you know, like poker table thing. Like, that's all in. And you're going all in the best conference in football. So you got to play somebody great too. Very different than a lot of these other conferences.
It's fair, but it's not unlike what we have seen the argument be in the past when you want to move to an extra conference game. And people make the argument, well, look how tough the SEC schedule already is. You got to play that extra game. There's a chance that you lose that game. And in years past, well, maybe losing early, that's better than losing late. But it all comes back to the same argument. But the fact that they are openly, and you have Lane Kiffin, Pat, openly talking about this, that's a problem for the College Football Playoff Committee. And if we set the precedent, now there's different scenarios that could work out, but let's just say that Alabama gets there, they lose a 2-point game. It's crazy the way that it ends, but ultimately the rationale we get from Ward Manuel when they select the College Football Playoff field is Alabama with the 3 losses. That is going to be a problem moving forward for the SEC championship. And I don't know if there's any way around it because we talked about how many corporate dollars are tied to that event. It's a lot of money.
More Lane Kiffin. He's talking about the dilution of these conference championship games now that the college football playoff has expanded.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a secret. I think it definitely has. You know, so that just is what it is. There's a cost and benefit to everything. There's great benefits to this playoff system and so many people being excited and fans and programs and more games. And then there's cost too. You know, the conference championships don't mean as much. And it's not just do you potentially get knocked out by losing it. Do you go get more injuries. So you're going to go get more injuries, play another game to get a bye, but then the other people are having a bye while you're playing. So I think that's why, I ain't going to go on record saying it, why a lot of coaches or some coaches I've talked to don't want to go to it.
And that's fair. And I understand because I think that Ole Miss right now, especially the way that they're playing, they absolutely deserve to be in. I wouldn't have said that 3 weeks ago, but you have to go back to the loss that they had earlier in the season as a 17-point home favorite to a Kentucky team that now it turns out is not good. You look at that, you look at going to an LSU team that potentially, Pat, it's on the table that they finished 7-5, and you lost to that team. So you combine the resumes of Kentucky and also LSU when it's all said and done, yet Ole Miss is not going to be playing in Atlanta. There's no big surprise there. I had to take that shot. But they're not going to be playing in Atlanta. But then, meanwhile, you've got an Alabama team that their best win was over Georgia. That's your best win. They lost to Vanderbilt, but you see what I'm saying? That their road has been a lot tougher, would you not agree, than Ole Miss's?
Yes. Yeah,
but in
no
the same
question.
breath, I can look at Ole Miss right now and say I would have no doubt that they are playing the best of anybody in the SEC, and that would mean in college football, and I have no problem. So while I start stating the argument for one team defending that they should be in, I do contradict myself because we're not getting 5 teams in. Do you believe that the SEC is going to get 5 teams in?
No.
And ultimately,
I don't.
it's going to be an SEC team that gets in over another SEC team.
I mean, because as of right now, and Mike said this best, they have already baked in the first 2 weeks, okay? They've already baked in that Oregon and Ohio State, absolutely, they're going.
Yeah.
Texas is absolutely going. Unless they lose to Texas A&M.
Well,
I mean, they went out. Obviously, they're going to be one of the top seeds.
How far do they fall, though? And who are you comparing the Texas resume against out of the SEC? Is it going to be a Tennessee? You can't do it against Georgia because that's not going to make sense. You would have to compare that resume to Tennessee and say, all right, has Texas been more – well, a 2-loss Texas team. But they've been more impressive.
But having 4 of the 5 top teams in the rankings from the Big Ten, as Mike pointed out, it's already baked in because Indiana gets absolutely curb stomped this weekend by Ohio State. You're still going to say, well, that was a battle of 2 top 5 teams. It was number 2 versus number 5. You can't drop Indiana out of the top 10 because they got absolutely skull-drugged by Ohio State.
No,
they're not going to do that.
Well, or even get beat by Ohio State because what argument are you making for Penn State and where they are right now?
Correct. Because that's why. You didn't drop Penn State down far enough. And their reasoning behind Penn State, their big win at West Virginia to start the season, they've got a great tight end, whatever the case may be. They've already baked in the Big Ten. They've got 4 of the top 5 teams. Meanwhile, we in the SEC, we can sit here and we can shoot holes in the Texas schedule as you did with Mike. Okay, they beat Michigan. Well, how good is Michigan? Okay, I mean, they went to the 4th quarter against Mississippi State. That was a ball game. Georgia comes to your place. They take care of business. So
all 10-2s and all 11-1s are not created equal.
You played Florida, the worst Florida team in decades. Then you have a situation where you're playing a Kentucky team this weekend. I mean, the SEC did a really, really strong favor for the people in Austin, Texas with this schedule this year and next year. I mean, it just, again, next year they'll have to go to Athens. Be a big one. But outside of that, I mean, what else has been difficult for Texas inside the conference? So, love to hear from you. The text line is open, 205-834-9450. Don't forget tonight the Big Ten Selection Committee will be the major topic of discussion tonight on national television.
Yeah, we will get to the text line 205-834-9450. It is a busy Tuesday. We got the college football playoff selection coming up tonight, and we got a lot to talk about. You can weigh in, 205-834-9450. If you want to call in, you can do that as well, 800-239-WJOX. We're live at Social Taco. The door's opening in 15 minutes. We're here until 2 on Jocks 94.5.
Doors are going to open in about 12 minutes from now here at Social Taco. Come by and see us. Expecting a really great crowd. It's ugly weather outside, but it's a good opportunity to take a long extended lunch break here at Social Taco. I want to tell you about Abide Roofing and Travis Lloyd and the outstanding team at Abide Roofing, 205-922-7134. I remember it like yesterday. It was kind of like a day like today. Had some wind, had some rain, and I was going out to my car, and I noticed that there was something on my roof that did not look right. So I called Travis Lloyd at 205-922-7134 and said, hey, Travis, I think I got a problem. How quickly can you get over here? And he got over there that afternoon. He got on my roof, spent about an hour and a half, got a drone, took some pictures, and said, hey, here's the problem. This is what we got going on here. Immediately contacted my insurance company, and before you know it, the Abide Roofing team, they were on my roof, and they were putting on a brand new roof. They did an absolutely amazing job. They used the very best materials. The process was seamless from him meeting with my insurance company, all the paperwork involved to get that claim, got it processed, and before I knew it, I had a brand new roof. The whole process took less than 2 weeks. It was incredible. That's what Abide Roofing can do for you if you've got some problems. 205-922-7134 or go to their website, abideroof.com.
Let's go to the Jocks text line, shall we?
We shall.
205-834-9450. And first one rolling in. When you talk about the college football playoff rankings, please don't forget how difficult it is to play at West Virginia. And Penn State's tight end is a really good player.
That is correct.
I would add to that, just to be fair, historically, Alabama's really good on defense, Pat.
Yes, that is something they absolutely they did say. So
this one coming in from the state of Mississippi. We appreciate you listening on the Jocks 94.5 app. Mike Griffith delivered the sermon of all college football needed to hear. Put that man on the committee.
And listen, I'll give him credit. I told everybody about a month ago when we went through this webinar. It was a whole hour long, and Mike was the very first person to say, now, hold on a second. You guys talk about you want this to be transparent, but you're not going to give us the strength of schedule. You know, you're not going to give us any kind of data points. And they said, well, we've hired an outside sourcing that's going to provide us with that data, but that will not be available to the public. So here we are. You've got a committee meeting behind closed doors. We're talking about transparency outside of Ward Manual making no sense. I mean, you need to have these people. You need to have a dais. You need to line them all up in a big conference room and let people ask them questions. Like why, Landrum, did you vote Indiana over Alabama or Georgia or Tennessee or Ole Miss in your final rankings? Give me your explanation. Because if you're on that committee, you should be able to be well-versed enough to stand in front of a camera and give everyone the explanation why you voted that way.
Look, as far as transparency, I would love to take it. We'll never get there, but I want mics and I want video, not just Mike Griffiths, but microphones in the committee meeting room. I want to televise these discussions and how they go between the committee members, because it would be like if we're drawing for $1 million. There's a raffle for $1 million, and we come out and we tell you who the winner is. You say, okay, well, how did you guys draw? Well, we outsource that. We can't tell you the company. We can't tell you how it was done. Just trust us. We went through the process, and those discussions were really intense on how it was going to be drawn or how the tickets were going to be shuffled. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
We'll never get that, though, as far as the transparency and seeing that. We're just going to get the explanation for whatever stooge they put up there. No disrespect to Ward Manual, but he's putting a pretty tough spot. As much grief as we gave Boo Corrigan, he's got to come out and explain without explaining how they came to the teams that they selected. We continue on the text line. Jamie says, great show, y'all. Wow, first time I've totally agreed with Mike. Spot on and bringing the heat. It was really good. You can find that at the podcast at jocksfm.com. This one reads, everyone has a complaint about the college football playoff committee, but what is the solution? I don't know if we have a solution.
I mean, it might not be a solution, but I think it would make people – I mean, we're always going to have a debate. It doesn't matter. I mean, we saw this coming. We said, okay, hey, we from the BCS days, we said, well, we need more teams. Okay, let's put 4. Then we had 4 since 2014, and then 4 wasn't enough. And so now we got 12, and now you're going to have the teams that's going to end up being probably ranked number 10 and 11 and 12 in the college football playoff rankings won't get into the college football playoff rankings because of the criteria.
So expand it to 24? Would that make everyone comfortable?
If I'm not mistaken, that's what the FCS does, is it not? Don't they have 24 now? They
That's
originally
right.
had expanded to 12, and then now
Right.
I think they're at 24. So I'm not saying that there should be more teams. For me personally, I just want more transparency. Like, I want them to be able to explain, okay, here is the strength of record. Why can't they print out not strength of record, I'm sorry.
Strength of schedule.
The strength of schedule. Why can't they put that out like the NCAA does with the net rankings? Or you have a Ken Palm. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like people smart enough to kind of figure this out, and you're good at math and Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that, you can figure it out. I just don't understand why they will not provide us with that data.
Well, and part of that, I believe, is the size of the field in college basketball. And the sample size you have, and you have so many games in a regular season that they can mix and match. There's not as much scrutiny put on that because we're only playing a 12-game regular season schedule in college football, and there's not as many teams. I think part of that is why it's easier in college basketball than it would be for a football playoff.
And then what's going to happen when you ultimately have 7 at-large spots that's being consumed by the SEC and the Big Ten? Then what's everybody going to say after that? Remember the scenario I brought up yesterday?
Yeah.
If Arizona State wins the Big 12 and Army wins the AAC, and let's just say they upset Notre Dame this weekend, Army is going to have a higher spot than any Big 12 champion, and the Big 12 may be left completely out of the college football playoff.
Yeah.
Because they would not be one of the top 4 conference winners, and then they would not have a team that would be ranked in the top 10 or 11 or 12.
Well, and also going back to the college basketball and how many teams we have in the tournament, we now have over almost 50 years of examples of teams that got in that were maybe a 15, a 16, a 14, an 11, whatever, that made a run.
Yeah.
And that's easier for people to digest than it would be nowadays. Just a thought. Ken says, Sankey was on Feinbaum last week complaining about SEC teams being underrated. He created the problem the way that he drew up the schedule. Georgia would be undefeated or at most one loss playing any other team's schedule. Georgia had a schedule now, but I see what you're saying. If Georgia played the schedule that BYU, but here's the thing, we'll never know. So we can only base these things on what we know and what we've seen and use the criteria from there to draw up who our 12 teams are going to be. Michael says they have to go through Atlanta in order to make the playoffs unless Missouri loses twice. So, yes, it is worth it to go to Atlanta because if they don't make, they don't go unless Missouri loses out or Alabama wins out. He's saying Texas is not ranked ahead of Alabama because of last year. They're ranked ahead because they have one loss. Well, you'll never be able to convince me that brand and cachet doesn't mean anything or preseason expectations. It does.
Yep.
It's helped Alabama in the past. It's helped Georgia in the past. It's helping Texas if Texas gets in with 2 losses based on their resume. We're going to talk about ceiling. We're going to talk about a quarterback, a system, an offensive line that was rated one of the best coming back in college football. Look at all the star power. Look at the glitz that is Texas. It's not a perfect system. I don't know if it ever will be. We continue here live from Social Taco and Home where the doors are about to open. Come and join us in the Taco Terrace. Tyler McComas talking OU and Bama. He joins us next on 3-Man Front, Jocks 94.5, JocksFM.com, and the Jocks 94.5 app where you can download and listen wherever you go throughout your college football playoff travels. Oh, welcome back. It's a Taco Tuesday. The doors have now opened. It's nasty outside. Maybe the rain going to taper off as the day progresses, but we are inside upstairs in the Taco Terrace. Come and join us for the Mix and Match Taco Tuesday, as we always do, but also the burritos, the Mexican pizzas, the quesadillas, whatever your heart delights. Don't forget about the award-winning margaritas, frozen or on the rocks, and also the dollar cervezas that FSU Dave loves so much. Brunch on the weekend as well at socialtaco.bar. Well, from daily exercisers and youth athletes to elite professionals, UAB Sports and Exercise Medicine treats everyone with the same level of exceptional care. With board-certified professional state-of-the-art imaging and injury prevention programs, their comprehensive team is here to keep you in the game. Visit uabmedicine.org/sports or call 205-930-8339 to make an appointment. UAB Sports and Exercise Medicine, knowledge moving medicine forward.
Well, the pathway for the University of Alabama to get to the SEC championship game and ultimately to the CFP, that road is going to go through Norman, Oklahoma. And let's go there now. Joining us, host of The Rush on the Ref, outstanding radio station there in Norman, Oklahoma, Tyler McComas joins us here on Three Man Front. Tyler, I hope the weather's better out in Oklahoma as it is in Birmingham today. It is awful.
I don't see a cloud in the sky right now, guys, so that's pretty good news. And, in fact, yesterday I looked at the forecast for Saturday, and I think there was like a 4% chance of rain. The high was around 64, 65. So I think all the Bama fans making their way out here are going to get perfect fall football weather.
Oh, wow. That sounds like ideal scenario. Well, speaking about ideal, I know year one of the SEC for Oklahoma has not quite gone like the fans and like many people thought it was going to go. Kind of give us the 411 on what has happened in your mind. Of course, the last time we saw them was a victory against the Auburn Tigers, but since then, not a lot has gone right.
Yeah, I think the last time we talked, I was, basically telling you guys how bad this offense is and how efficient that it's not and how much it's turned the ball over. And, unfortunately, things haven't really changed on that front. They made a couple of quarterback changes. Quarterback play's been an issue. Offensive line's been an issue. I'm sure you guys probably heard about how decimated they've been at wide receiver this year. There's been some bright spots here and there offensively, but for the most part, it's been a rough go. And I've seen some things this year. I followed this program my entire life. I've seen some things this year that, frankly, guys, I've never seen before. I've never been to an OU home game where the game is effectively over 5 minutes into the first quarter. That was the case when South Carolina came to town about a month ago. They were already up 21-0, and there wasn't even 10 minutes left to play in the first quarter. Going into Saturday, it's been since the late 90s when John Blake was here, the last time that OU's been this big of a home underdog. 14 points to Alabama. I mean, OU was an underdog at home to Tennessee, but I probably less than 5 times OU's been a home underdog since 2000, and they certainly haven't been this big of an underdog in a long time. So it's been really different. The defense, guys, I mean, here's the thing, and here's what's wild, is that OU's 5-5, and they're just fighting at this point just to get to a 6th win and make a bowl game. And 2 of the 3 sides for this team are actually pretty good. The defensive front has been fantastic. It's been awesome. They've been great against the run. I think the secondary at times have had some issues, but overall they've been good. Linebacker, you've got one of the best in the country in Danny Stutzman. No complaints at all from me from the defense. This looks like a Brent Venables defense in year 3. And even special teams, I think that you're, much improved even from last year. You got a kicker that hit a 56-yarder at Missouri. You've got one of the best punters in the country. So it's odd and very frustrating that you figured out the defense, you figured out special teams, but offensively you've been so bad and you've turned the ball over so much that you're now sitting at 5-5 and just hoping to get a 6th win. So it's been a very odd year. It's been a very frustrating year. And yes, of course, we're talking about 2 blue bloods playing on Owen Field on Saturday. That doesn't happen a lot around here. But mainly, guys, the conversation now is we got to look ahead to 2025. Who's that offensive coordinator hire going to be? And there's a very familiar name in SEC circles who may be looked at as the front runner right now for that offensive coordinator job, Dan Mullen.
That would be interesting and definitely raise a lot of eyebrows. Tyler McComas joining us here on Three Man Front from Norman, Oklahoma. He is a host of The Rush there on the Ref, and all of our guests join us on the Buyers Right Insurance Hotline. I'm curious, and I'm guessing that this discussion has come up on your show with you and your listeners, and maybe amongst you guys who host the show. But for Oklahoma, this schedule, even being decimated, the questions at quarterback, Jeff Lebby not running the offense, Seth Luttrell getting fired during the season. With all of that being said, how much discussion has been this particular Oklahoma team, if they played that 2023 Big 12 schedule, how much better are they on paper?
Not really, to be honest, because we've heard it from, visiting SEC fans in Norman or, when we go on the road. You aren't SEC ready. I mean, you guys could probably imagine that. You get beat by someone and their fans are rubbing it in OU fans' face. You're not SEC ready. And our rebuttal is, well, yeah, but I don't know if they were Big 12 ready. I don't know if they were ACC ready. I don't know if they were American Athletic Conference ready this year. And I'm really talking about that with the offense because there was a time, and this time was 2 to 3 weeks ago, where OU was ranking like dead last in all of FBS football, right there with Kennesaw State and some other schools in terms of least amount of explosive plays or, most turnovers, some offensive numbers that you don't want to beat. Would they have a better record right now in the Big 12 and with last year's schedule? Probably. But with the offense being as poor as it is, I don't think that just the schedule puts you in a place that you want to be in terms of competing for the college football playoff. Yes, the schedule has been difficult, but, man, you've been non-competitive in so many games this year. Texas, you were non-competitive. South Carolina, you were non-competitive as well. I mean, Tennessee, I know it ended up being a 10-point game, but I don't think the score is indicative of how much Tennessee really dominated that game. It's just Ole Miss. I mean, they pulled away in the second half. It's just been a really tough year, and I think that those problems for this offense would have existed even in the Big 12 because of because of Seth Luttrell, how poor the play calling was, how poor the overall scheme was. Just everything was kind of ripe for a disaster when you look at it this way, especially with how bad they've been on the offensive line, guys. I mean, that's really where the real issue with this team lies.
All right, so the last time we saw Oklahoma in person, it was at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and they had made a change at quarterback. What's the expectation this weekend against Alabama? Who's going to be the starter? Could we see both quarterbacks? Just take us down that offensive road against the Tide.
I'm glad you asked me that today and not this time yesterday because my answer yesterday would have been, I have no idea. Because Brent, during a bye week last week, didn't have a press conference. And he was, he wasn't on the SEC teleconference. And, I mean, we really haven't heard from Brent since the Missouri loss until yesterday when he had his coach's show. And we'll hear from him in about 15 minutes with his press conference. But I was of the thought after the Missouri game, with the way that Jackson Arnold fumbled that away, that I don't know if you can throw him back out there. Maybe you go back to Michael Hawkins. Maybe you go to Casey Thompson. You guys might remember that name.
Yeah.
Played at Texas, played at Nebraska, which is funny because his dad played quarterback at Oklahoma, yet he's played against Oklahoma at Texas. He's played against Oklahoma at Nebraska as well. And we thought last week there may be a chance that he could start this game. But they announced the game captains yesterday. And OU does it a little bit different than most places. They have different captains essentially every single week, which, is a little bit odd. But the point is that Jackson Arnold was named a starter on senior day, along guys like Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, some guys that are going through senior day. Maybe that doesn't tell everything, but I'm going to guess if Jackson Arnold last night was named the captain for this game, I would probably feel comfortable saying that he's the starter. Now, does he finish the game? I am not. I mean, if he has issues fumbling the ball like he has so much this year, I think there's a chance you could see one of the other two quarterbacks. But if I'm guessing right now who QB1 is for the Bama game, I'm going to say that it's probably Jackson Arnold.
Tyler, where do you start when it comes to this matchup with Alabama? They're playing some of their better football right now. We know where Oklahoma is and just trying to find that win to get bowl eligible. When you compare Alabama to some of the Sooners' other previous opponents, would you say that Alabama is the most talented, the best eye test type team that the Sooners have seen this season, or would you throw out somebody else?
So we talked yesterday, who's the best team in the SEC? I mean, it just feels so wide open right now. And I think, in a rarity, me and my co-host both agreed that we think Alabama's the best team in the SEC. In fact, if this makes anyone out there feel better, Bob Stoops comes on our show once a week, and I asked him the same question Friday. And this is before, Georgia beat Tennessee or, Alabama played this weekend. I said, Coach, I don't know who the best team in the SEC is. Can you please tell us who you think it is? And he was pretty confident that it's Alabama as well right now. And, again, that was before this past weekend. So I think that Alabama right now, the version, this is the best team that Oklahoma's going to face. And if they've had trouble moving the ball consistently on other defenses this year, maybe this isn't an Alabama defense that, would rank up there with one of Saban's best defenses, but they're still very capable. And I still think OU is going to have a real difficult time moving the ball on Bama consistently. Now, I think this OU defense can have success against Alabama. I think that they're that good. I think their defensive front is that good. I think that OU stands a chance of maybe slowing down Alabama's rushing attack. But here's the problem, guys, is that OU's offense goes 3 and out so much, or they turn the ball over so much, they put their defense in awful situations, they lose the time of possession battle. At some point it breaks. And you guys know Jalen Milroe can turn your lights out at any point in the game, especially with his feet. So I kind of expect a game where OU's defense comes out after a bye week, fired up, it's senior day, crowd's going to be excellent, all that, and they have some early success. But with OU's inability to really do some things offensively, I think as the game goes on, Bama's going to start hitting on, big plays and probably separate themselves and probably end up winning this game right around where that spread number's at.
I wanted to ask you about Brent Venables' wife, Julie Venables, because it came out this week that her cancer had returned, and I know that the Oklahoma administration, they have come out in support publicly for Brent Venables. Obviously, he's going through a lot. Forget about what's happening on the football field, but can you give us an update on his wife, Julie Venables?
Yeah, unfortunately, 2 months after she found out she was cancer-free, the cancer returned. She learned that the cancer came back, and she recently had a tumor removed. I believe that she's in New York City right now, just kind of, resting at this point, and I think she's going to go through chemotherapy very soon. But, yeah, it's just an awful situation for Julie Venables, Brent Venables, and the entire family. And I feel for the guys. I mean, he's really gone through it throughout his entire coaching career here because, like you said, this isn't the first time he and the family have had to go through this. And now they're going through it again amidst all the conversations of, well, could they afford his buyout, the job security, everything else. It just hasn't felt like he's been able to catch a break necessarily in his first 3 years. And this has got to be a difficult situation to deal with. And everyone's rallying around him. The record is not what you want it to be. And he's even openly said that it's unacceptable how this year has gone. I strongly believe that he's going to get a 2025. I do. And I don't think that he's going to get a 2025 season just because the administration feels bad about what he's going through right now. The buyout number's large, and I think that they're going to give him an opportunity to have an OC hire at the end of the season and really kind of reset and things, if they can be better or not. It's just weird for us and weird for me because we're going to go into a season next year, guys, where Oklahoma's head coach is on a hot seat, and Oklahoma's head coach is on one of the hottest seats in the SEC and one of the hottest seats in the country. And why I say that is because there has not been an Oklahoma head coach on a hot seat going into a season since 1998.
Wow.
Bob Stoops was never on the hot seat. Lincoln Riley was never on the hot seat. And I don't think that Brent Venables has truly been on the hot seat until now going into next year. So it's just kind of, we've talked about it all the time. We know what that looks like for other programs, but you've never seen it with Oklahoma football before. So that's kind of unfamiliar territory as well. With all the, losses that have come here over the course of the past 3 years, which, hey, people aren't really used to all of that as well either.
Before we let you go, I want to go back to something you said to Landrum a little bit earlier in the interview, and that is a very interesting name, intriguing to me. You brought up the name Dan Mullen as a possible hire as an offensive coordinator there at Oklahoma. Does Brent and Dan have a history Is this something where Dan has made it known that he would be willing to get back in the business as an OC? I'm just curious about how his name is now coming, I guess, to light a little bit in regards to that job.
Dan Mullen was around here in the spring,
Okay.
and they brought him in to, speak with the team. I don't know, to be quite honest with you, what that relationship has looked like prior to this year. Maybe Brent Venables and Dan Mullen had a connection before then. But Dan, he's at least been around a few times since the start of spring. And here's kind of the overall thought process with this. And to be totally transparent, once I kind of first learned that this was a possibility, I didn't like the idea of it. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've come around to it. And OU fans have had a really tough time coming around to the idea of Dan Mullen because we all remember how he acted and what he said after OU beat Dan Mullen in that 2020 Cotton Bowl, when he basically said, this game doesn't count, it shouldn't count. We played our last game in the SEC championship, which I believe that was against Alabama that year. He made a lot of he had some opt-outs, but he made a lot of excuses. So that's been tough for the fan base to get over with. But why Dan Mullen is such a high priority target at this point? Well, you're in a new conference, and Dan Mullen has a lot of SEC experience. And Dan Mullen has a lot of really good SEC experience, both as a coordinator and as a head coach as well. He's done a great job with quarterbacks wherever he's been, even going back to his days at Utah with Urban Meyer. And I think people see it as, well, you don't just have an offensive coordinator. In a lot of ways, you essentially have a head coach of an offense. A guy with head coaching experience that can really run that side of the ball because, not that Brent's not a great head coach, or he can't be a CEO. He's a defensive guy at heart. That's what he knows. So if you can hire an OC that can essentially oversee the entirety of the offense, and Brent will have his hand in the offense, but kind of let him do his thing on the defensive side, maybe that's what works best. So I'll be honest, I had to warm up to the idea of Dan Mullen. I think they've gotten there in a year that's going to be so critical in 2025. But some other names to watch out for, Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator at Washington State, and Joe Craddock, the offensive coordinator at Tulane, who a lot of people think highly of as well. So those are the three names that I would think are probably most likely at this point for that job.
That is Tyler McComas, host of The Rush on the Ref from 2 to 6 this afternoon. Listen to his program. It is worth the listen. Always appreciate your insight, Tyler, and hopefully plenty of Bama fans will behave themselves this weekend in Norman.
OU fans have always said nothing but great things about Alabama fans. People still talk about when Alabama came to Norman in 2002. They were awesome. They were great. We still talk about our road trip to Tuscaloosa in 2003. That was awesome. That was great. So,
well, here's
Alabama
the difference. In those
fans,
2002, 2003 games, Tyler's were victories by the Sooners over Alabama.
Yeah,
so.
Well, maybe that matters. But Alabama fans coming here, I promise, this is not going to Athens. This is not going to Knoxville. You will be treated extremely, extremely well on Saturday. OU fans think very, very highly of Alabama fans. I can assure you of that.
Well, Tyler, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up very, very soon. Enjoy the game this weekend.
You bet. Appreciate you guys.
Tyler McComas there from Norman, Oklahoma, breaking down not only the future of Brent Venables, the OU program, but also this weekend's game that our own Conrad Van Order is going to be attending. We think he hasn't changed his mind yet. All of our guests join us on the Buyers Right Hotline for all your insurance, financial, and HR needs. It's Buyers Right Insurance, a Higginbotham partner. Well, when it comes to your technology, don't settle for anything less than a winning team. Evolve IT, they're your trusted local IT partner. At Evolve IT, they're your MVPs for all things tech, like network management, cybersecurity, keeping your business systems running smoothly. No fumbles, no downtime, just expert support right here in Birmingham. Evolve IT is ready to take your tech game to the next level. Online at evolvebhm.com. That's evolvebhm.com, or give them a call 205-749-8970. Evolve IT. Make sure you tell them Landrum from Jocks 94.5 sent you.
When we come back on Three-Man Front, we'll unpack what Tyler told us, including Bob Stoops telling him on Friday that Alabama is the best team in the Southeastern Conference. We'll get into that. We'll take your texts. We'll open up the phone lines, 1-800-239-WJOX. We're live at Social Taco here on Jocks 94.5. It is 11:23. Jocks 94.5. Come by and see us. We're live at Social Taco here in Homewood. A little bit of news from the NFL. Boy, it just gets worse and worse for the New York Jets. Joe Douglas, the general manager of the New York Jets, he has been fired. That's right, 5+ years as the general manager. The Jets have had a record of 30-64 over the 5+ years. I'm really surprised that he lasted this long. So Joe Douglas, the general manager of the Jets, so many question marks about this franchise, Landry, moving forward because, one, the owner of the team, Woody Johnson, when Trump was president the first time, he was the U.S. ambassador to Great Britain.
Huh.
And the feeling is that Trump is going to name him as ambassador again to Great Britain, which he would then have to turn over control of the Jets to his brother. And so he would recuse himself from any of the decision-making going on with the Jets while he's overseas. So with that being said, you've got an owner that's going to probably be overseas. You don't know what the situation is with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers says he wants to play next year. I'm not really sure if the Jets want him to play next year. They would have to take a cap hit on that. And then with all the questions that they need now on that roster, and you got to fulfill that from a GM and a head coach who's going to come in and be the head coach of the Jets. So,
yeah, you thought that Aaron Rodgers was going to be the answer, but for whatever reason, the surrounding parts, whether it's head coach, he's not the answer. And it's like you said, how many quality years do we still think we have with Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback in the league?
Tell you what, I mean, they've gone out and they've got some offensive pieces, and maybe Aaron Rodgers will point to the fact that it was the play calling or maybe the offensive line. I'm not really sure, but just, man, you go out and you've gotten the hosses like you have to try to surround him, and you're not playing any better. Now, again, the defense is what lost it on Sunday against Indianapolis, but still, he is definitely not the Aaron Rodgers, from a few years ago.
No, he is not. But let me tell you about Big Whiskeys because they are your place for great food of all varieties with a full menu ranging from apps, salads, burgers to steaks. Their bar features unique cocktails, over 120 whiskeys, including whiskey on tap, and plenty of screens to catch all the games all weekend long. They also offer different food and drink specials each day of the week. They have happy hour, and the kitchen is open late every single night. So check them out in the Stadium Trace Village off Highway 150 near the Hoover Met.
If you missed our interview with Mike Griffith in hour number 1, it is worth the time to go back and listen to it. He brought the heat talking about tonight's Big Ten Selection Committee, the show that they're going to be having. Not the college football playoff selection show, but it's the Big Ten selection show. What's going to happen tonight? He was talking about how these rankings, Landrum, have already baked in the likes of the Big Ten, with Oregon being 1, Ohio State 2, Penn State 4, Indiana 5. So no matter what happens to a Penn State or Indiana moving forward, they believe that they're already baked into the results where they're going to get 4 teams in regardless. So just an outstanding interview with Mike, so go back and listen to that on the podcast. Let's go to the phones at 1-800-239-WJOX. Ronnie in Montgomery wants to talk about the CFP. Hey, Ronnie.
Hey, how's everybody doing today?
We're good, Ronnie. Hope you are.
Yes, sir. No, thank y'all for taking my call, but I was thinking that, like in the NFL, what determines the teams to make the playoff is their win-loss record. Is that correct?
Correct.
How about with high school football? Would that be the same, wouldn't it?
It is your one-loss record, but it is based on your region record. So you could could win. Yeah,
sure.
you could win all your non-region games. And then you get in region play, and you don't win as many. If you're not one of the top 4 teams, you don't go to the playoffs.
Right, and therefore there's some teams that make the playoff with some,
some 500 records,
a win-loss record. Yeah,
yes, sir.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Well, nobody seems to analyze and scrutinize records and all that kind of thing. What we're doing with college, and I was wondering, wouldn't it just be a lot better for everybody's sanity just to go by win-loss record?
Well, there's unfortunately, Ronnie, there's too much money involved now, so they like to complicate things. So
that is the reason, isn't it?
everyone loves a committee.
Though, really.
No,
yeah,
it
that's
is.
a shame. But
is.
they could still have a 12-team playoff. Just simply go by the record. But anyway, I want y'all to know Molly's a star.
We think so. We think so.
The
Yes,
brightest
sir.
of all the stars.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for taking my call, guys.
Hey, Ronnie, thank you for listening down in Montgomery. Call us anytime. Appreciate
Thank
it
you,
very
Ronnie.
much.
Molly, did you tell him to say that?
Are you related to Ronnie, Molly?
No, I'm not.
Is that Uncle Ronnie?
I don't have an
That's
Uncle
cousin
Ronnie.
Ronnie.
Cousin Ronnie.
It's cousin Ronnie.
Sorry.
Don't have a cousin Ronnie either.
205-834-9450. Back to the text line, and this one coming in from Scott, Long Island. And he says, Mike broke the code today regarding the playoff committee selection process. We all know that Commissioner Sankey listens to your show. Hopefully he's listening and will quietly protect the top 6 of the SEC in the future scheduling after 2025 if they're going to play this game with the selection process. We all know that Bama, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Tennessee, and historically Oklahoma drive the ratings and the revenue to the conference. Therefore, protect them and protect the brand. It just means more.
Well, I anticipate what's going to happen is you're going to get one more year of kind of dissecting and letting this digest with this 12-team playoff. The SEC and the Big Ten, they want automatic qualifiers. People are going to be griping and complaining about that. I've already seen a bunch of Big 12 bloggers. They're going crazy about it. You hear, obviously, Bama hater on this radio station constantly, bemoaning certain things. At the end of the day, the SEC and the Big Ten, they do deserve more. Now, we'll say that this year, I don't believe Indiana. Now, if Indiana beats Ohio State, we're having a different conversation on Monday. But as we stand right now and Indiana loses to Ohio State, Indiana is going to go to the college football playoff having beaten 7 of the worst teams in the Big Ten Conference. I'm talking about the last 7
That's fair.
in the Big Ten standings. So, I mean, you can't hide that. And the reason why is because when the Big Ten, just like when the SEC starts putting these schedules together, the SEC claims they looked at a model over the last 10 years, and they put these teams in different hierarchies in regards to how good these teams were. So if you were put in Team A's grouping, then you would be playing more of the Group B as opposed to playing the bottom ring of the SEC, if that makes sense. Well, the Big Ten's basically doing the same thing. Indiana's been so bad for the last few years that they were pitted against the Purdues of the world and the Northwesterns and people like that. So they are playing on who's on their schedule, but when you get to big boy football like this and that's all you can crow about is beating a Nebraska team that is fighting for its bowl life, no offense, Molly, but if that's all that you can crow about, then you got a problem.
Well, but this kind of comes back to the Texas argument. And who has Texas beaten? They beat a Michigan team that Indiana last week beat. Now, it wasn't as convincing, but they've been very convincing in a lot of their wins. But outside of that, who has Texas beat? A road game at Vanderbilt? We could probably find a comp there in the Big Ten that Indiana has beaten. So let's see what they do in their first, if we want to call it big boy test of the year, against Ohio State in the Horseshoe in Columbus, Ohio. But let's be honest. Indiana is the fun story. It is the story that people have gravitated to because historically they've been wins and losses one of the worst football programs in college football.
Yeah,
and especially when it comes to Power 4 or Power 5 conferences, and they've been playing for a long time. But they haven't. I would have to go back, and their non-conference has. Charlotte might be the best team that they played non-conference. They had Western Illinois. They had Charlotte. I'm trying to remember the other team that they played. But you go apples to apples. I'm not saying an Indiana should get in over a 2-loss Alabama if Indiana has 1 loss. But I think that, again, it would be disingenuous to just say that, well, there's no way that Indiana belongs in the conversation.
Let me throw this crazy scenario out to you. And Patton Trustful texted into the show, and he says the following. This is based on 3 losses. Ohio State could still get left out. So Ohio State loses to Indiana, then loses the rivalry game to Michigan. What happens to Ohio State?
Well, first of all, Ryan Day gets fired.
Yes, that would happen.
They're playing with an interim coach while they await the selection committee.
And at that point in time, do they not? Do they get an opportunity to play in the CFP?
Right. A 3-loss?
A 3-loss Ohio State as compared to a 3-loss Alabama.
I told you, I don't care who it is that has 3 losses. If there is a team that has 3 losses that gets left out of the college football playoff, I am not going to stand on the top of the building with the megaphone and proclaim that they deserve to be in. 3 losses is a lot. My threshold is 2.
So if Alabama loses the SEC championship game with 3 losses, I'm not coming at you. I'm just asking your philosophy on.
I will not stand on top of the building
and proclaim that Alabama should be in.
If we want to go back to the Vanderbilt loss, if we want to go back to you should have taken care of your business at Neyland Stadium. Now playing the extra game, I want to get the explanation from Ward Manuel, though, in playing that extra game.
Okay.
How much that affected their decision.
All right, so there's so many roads that we can go down with this conversation.
That was a very unfair question.
We're going to continue this conversation. We're live at Social Taco here in Homewood. Come by and see us. We're located up here at the Taco Terrace. Rob is here from Helena. We've got Pelham Gator wearing his Tim Tebow jersey. It's interesting he's wearing his Tebow jersey as they're getting ready to play Ole Miss, who beat Tim Tebow down in the swamp. You remember that famous speech Tim Tebow gave after the Ole Miss loss? Remember that? It's on a plaque outside of the swamp.
Never,
ever again.
ever,
Yeah.
ever.
More from Social Taco. This is 3-Man Front on Jocks 94.5. Now the rain continues to fall here in central Alabama. But that just means you can take a longer lunch hour, right? Come see us. We're at Social Taco here in Homewood, right here on top of the Taco Terrace on the second level here at Social Taco.
Well, hopefully with the rain outside, you have not experienced your roof leaking. If you have an older roof, you're thinking it may need to be replaced, well, listen up. Our friends at Roof Max of Hoover have a professional and affordable roof treatment scientifically proven. to reduce the aging process of your asphalt roof. This is how it works. Roof Max, they're going to resaturate your old, dirty, dry shingles with a natural bio-friendly treatment. Gives you 5 more years of protection guaranteed. Get the free roof assessment from Roof Max of Hoover. Call or text them at 205-913-2243. It's 205-913-2243. And use promo code JOCKS for the 10% discount. So why not pay pennies on the dollar as opposed to coming out of pocket when insurance isn't kicking in extra money? And the average cost of replacing a roof here in the U.S. is $15,000 to $20,000. Once again, Roof Max of Hoover, 205-913-2243. Get the discount. Make sure you tell them Landrum from Jock sent you.
So you heard audio earlier in the show. Lane Kiffin revealed to some coaches that he has conversations with that they don't want to play in the SEC championship game due to the college football playoff. Kirby Smart was asked about that yesterday, and Kirby says, why would I put energy or time into trying to figure out what the best pathway is, including the SEC championship, when I'm worried about UMass? I just don't think it's a quality conversation. End of quote.
Well, you don't have a future in sports radio, Kirby.
Getting ready for UMass.
Do Ole Miss fans, do they cringe a little bit when Lane does these type of interviews and he's just like squirrel and, yarn ball. Let's play with the yarn ball.
No, I don't think so. I think they're pretty happy right now.
No, I'm just saying staying focused and not having one of these games that slips up on you.
All right, so that's one of the conversations is to play in the SEC championship game, to not to play in the SEC championship game. Can we still get to the CFP? This is what Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, this is what he told Paul Feinbaum in regards to being penalized for playing in the SEC championship game.
We also have seen that the committee in past years, when it was a 14 playoff, would carefully evaluate that championship game loss. And so we had teams that lost in a championship game that still participated in the playoff. And I would expect that the committee continues that form of thinking, that these championship games, that 13th data point, is more of a reward and a recognition for the work done. And so I've been careful about commenting as the committee deliberates. It's still early in the process. We have 3 games to play. This Saturday, there's opportunities for teams to perform very well, to make an impression. I was pleased relative to maybe a year ago about the movement and the willingness and the statement from the chair that each week they look fresh at what's there. And I'm confident that the Southeastern Conference will distinguish itself as we move forward through this process.
That's the problem. They're not looking at it fresh each and every week. It's already baked in. When you've got 4 of the top 5 teams coming from the Big Ten Conference, when Indiana hasn't played anybody, Penn State, the only team that they've played, they beat or got beaten by at home. It's already baked in. That's the problem. Now, we talk about this every Wednesday. We compare the CFP rankings to the old BCS, okay? So the BCS standings, if you were to take all the apparatuses that is involved in regards to the BCS, which includes the AP poll, the coaches poll, the computer polls, the Billingsley, the Colley Massey, the Sagarin, and etc. This is your top 10 in the college football playoff rankings based on the BCS formula.
Okay.
Number 1 would be Oregon. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Texas. Number 4, Penn State. Number 5, Indiana. Number 6, Notre Dame. Number 7, Georgia. 8, Alabama. 9, Ole Miss. 10, Miami. 11 is Tennessee, 12 is SMU. That is your top 12 according to the BCS formula that was updated after this previous weekend's games. So what's the biggest glaring differences you see between that BCS standings and the one that came out last week?
As far as glaring, there's not a whole lot.
Now keep in mind, this BCS ranking that I just read, that has been updated, whereas tonight we will get an updated CFP ranking.
Well, I was just looking at the AP as you were going through that.
Right.
And it mirrors, at least in the top 10. Now, there might be a Notre Dame is here instead of here, one spot, or a Georgia or an Alabama is at 7 instead of 8. But there's not a huge discrepancy. When you're reading that off, and Miami is at 10 in the AP, Tennessee is currently at 11.
You know, they're going to tell you that
I don't think we're going to get that much variance.
All right, so they're going to tell you they go in a room and they said, okay, we're just going to forget everything and let's re-rank everybody. Excuse me. And we know that that's not what happens.
Right.
Because it's bias. I mean, they're going to put in their mind because, as Mike Griffith pointed out, these teams are already baked in. So no matter what happens, if Ohio State loses to Indiana, Ohio State fans are going to say, well, we just lost to the number 5 team in America. So basically probably what's going to end up happening is they're going to flip-flop Ohio State and Indiana in next week's rankings because they're still going to put Ohio State ahead of Penn State because they beat Penn State in Happy Valley. But the biggest question to me is where are they going to put Georgia tonight in regards to Alabama and Ole Miss? According to the BCS standings, Georgia would be ahead of Alabama and Ole Miss. So are you putting Georgia ahead of the 2 teams that beat you head-to-head?
I don't think so. And I think with BYU losing, obviously with Tennessee losing to Georgia, this is where you're going to see the biggest movement. And that allows. Now, my question is, what do you do with the Miami? Where is the Miami going to fit into this? How does the committee view them over their one-loss out Miami team? But currently, they were ranked ahead, right, of some of those other SEC teams, including Alabama and Ole Miss. Now that we have seen Georgia do what they did, I don't think that they jump either Alabama or Ole Miss. Committee's too smart for that, and they will let that kind of play out. But I do think that you'll see Alabama maybe jump up a couple of spots. I don't think Notre Dame, they're going to be stuck on Notre Dame. Notre Dame just moves up. But again, Miami, do they drop a little bit, according to the College Football Playoff Committee tonight, and are they replaced by SEC schools?
So Heather Dinich, who knows this stuff as well as anybody, she has great contacts, not saying that she knows how the rankings are going to come out tonight. But she put pen to paper, and she has Miami at number 7, ahead of Alabama at 8, Ole Miss 9, Georgia at 10. Now, one of the conversations we were having before we went to break, you were talking about a 3-loss team coming out of the SEC championship game. So let me pose this question to you. I'm not being adversarial. I'm not being ugly.
You're always adversarial.
No, I'm not. I want your honest opinion. I know you'll give it. So if Alabama makes it to the SEC championship game and they lose to Texas, okay, or Texas A&M, either or. Bama's got 3 losses. Do you put a 2-loss Ole Miss team in the college football playoff over a 3-loss Alabama? You see the dilemma?
Yeah. Well, then that's when I go back to quality wins. And for Alabama, what are we going to count as their quality wins? UGA?
UGA would be obviously number 1.
Okay. Who's next for you?
South Carolina.
Okay.
Mizzou's probably going to be a top 25 team.
All right. We're missing anybody else?
I don't think we're missing anybody.
Okay. And then for Ole Miss.
Well, I mean, I don't know where Wisconsin's going to end up.
Oh, and LSU. We'll throw LSU in there.
Well, you don't know where LSU's going to end
Well,
up.
I know, but at least with Ole Miss, we could say their 2 losses were to Kentucky and to LSU, a team that Alabama beat. Their best win is going to be Georgia. Their next best win is going to be South Carolina.
Yes.
And then third best win
might be Florida this weekend.
Could be Florida this weekend. No, that's tough. And there's some bias here because what we do on a daily basis and it's impossible, as much grief, and we're having fun with it with Ward Manuel and him saying historically, it's hard to block out Alabama's success over the past 16 seasons under Nick Saban and the cachet that they bring. Do they get the benefit of the doubt because they hadn't played Ole Miss this year on the field? But are they getting the benefit of the doubt of some of those head-to-head matchups? Shouldn't matter, but is the committee thinking about that?
I do find it interesting because yesterday during Lane Kiffin's press conference, he kept citing a 3-score win against Georgia.
Yeah.
He kept saying that.
That's comparing
that's
the
comparing
resume
directly
of
against Alabama.
I'm surprised he didn't say, hey, and we had to go on the road to play a South Carolina team. We dominated them, beat them by 24 points.
No,
only
that will be the talking points. Absolutely.
But then Alabama could also come back and say, you lost
to LSU.
And to Kentucky at home.
Yeah, and we curb stomped LSU
in their stadium.
In Tiger Stadium. So, yeah, I mean, it's a, back and forth. You see the warning signs, windows or doors that stick, cracks in the brick or block, leaning or those bowing walls in the basement, settling or sinking of your house. How much time before a minor repair will become a serious structural damage to your home? You can't afford to wait. Call APS today for a free estimate, 205-951-9717. And with a wet day like today, wet basements can also lead to issues with your home, from mold and mildew to rot and air quality problems. APS waterproofers can help you with that as well. Call them, 205-951-9717, or visit APS on their website, alabamaprofessional.com.
All right, we will continue with your text, 205-834-9450. We're talking about the college football playoff rankings, what is unveiled tonight, what it means, and the big games this weekend and some of the chaos we could continue to see. Three-man front live from Social Taco and Homewood on Jocks 94.5.
Okay, so Landrum and I, during the commercial break, we continued our conversation about Ole Miss, and then we threw in Tennessee, best losses, worst losses, whatever you want to say. And since the committee will not give us a strength of schedule to kind of figure this stuff out, we started asking, okay, the worst loss for Ole Miss, the worst loss for Alabama, the worst loss for Tennessee. So what we did is we went to The Athletic. What they do each and every week, they rank the teams 1 through 134. So based on the rankings by The Athletic, Alabama's worst loss this year is Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt comes in, according to The Athletic, number 31 in college football. Okay? Arkansas is considered the worst loss for Tennessee. Arkansas comes in at number 37. Ole Miss, just like Landrum has been proclaiming, that loss to Kentucky. Kentucky's program currently, according to The Athletic, is ranked number 65 out of 134. So if you compare Alabama's worst loss or Tennessee's worst loss and Ole Miss's worst loss, it's hands down Ole Miss to Kentucky.
It is, but then, all right, so we go from losses to best wins.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee, you lost the game by a couple of touchdowns to Georgia, a team that Alabama beat, a team that Ole Miss beat. But you could still make the argument if you're Tennessee, well, what about the head-to-head with Alabama? How does that not count? You've already seen it on the field. We deserve to be in there more. If you want to go back to NC State and when they dominated them, NC State right now,
they're a 5-5 football team,
and they're 65th or lower in that
63rd.
poll. 63rd in that poll.
Yeah, so basically you've got California at 62, NC State at 63, Auburn at 64, and Kentucky at 65. Just to put it in relative terms. So if Tennessee wants to proclaim that NC State's one of their top wins, because when they did play NC State, they were a top 25 program.
And then does it come down to eye test, and we're going a little bit of college basketball. Who's playing the best football late in the season? Well, unfortunately for Tennessee, that game at Athens fell late in the season, and that's going to be the true last snapshot we get of this Tennessee football team. They're not going to get a whole lot of credit for beating Vanderbilt at the end of the year because that star has.
Well, the
faded
good news
just a
for
little bit.
Alabama is that Vanderbilt is 6-4. So even if Vanderbilt were to lose the remaining 2 games, they're still they're a bowl eligible team.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're still going to get some love off of that, and the jury's out on Arkansas. I mean, how lost is that going to look on Tennessee's resume if Arkansas loses their final 2 games of the season? Then all of a sudden, they're not going to be number 37.
But it all comes back to why this is not a perfect system.
Oh, by the way,
never going to be a perfect system. Michigan at 38. Give
Michigan
me a break.
at 38. So all the talk about let's go on the road and play the defending national champion like Texas did. I mean, Michigan is sandwiched in between Arkansas and Duke, according to The Athletic.
But going back to my point, it's not perfect. And if you're a Tennessee Vol fan and you get left out, you have a valid argument. If you're Alabama, you certainly have a valid argument. If you're Ole Miss now, based on what you were able to do in South Carolina and Georgia being those 2 wins, and they won them convincingly, you have an argument if you're left out. That's the problem with this. I just don't see the SEC getting 5 teams in. I think that's a little too much for everybody else to stomach.
Yeah.
I think they get 4, and the Big Ten's going to get 4, and then everything else shakes out. If they do get 5, who does that? Ooh. Things will have to fall apart in the Big 12. And what happens in the ACC?
And then what
Is
message?
that a clear picture?
And then what message are you sending? Whether it breaks out where it's Georgia or Alabama or whoever, and they lose a 3rd game in the SEC championship game, and then they ultimately do not get in. What message are you sending from that point in time?
No, it's fair. I'll tell you a game I want to see, a matchup I want to see. I want to see Colorado and Ole Miss.
That would be entertaining.
How much fun would that be? We got 2 more hours. We're live from Social Taco in Homewood. Adam Rittenberg to talk college football playoff and more. As we continue, 3-man front on Jocks 94.5. Welcome back in hour number 3. Three-man front live from Social Taco and Home where the doors are open. We're upstairs, dry and cozy here in the Taco Terrace. Wet weather outside. We understand that can make traveling difficult, especially when you're not used to having a whole lot of rainy weather, especially here in the last, month and a half. But that is going to usher in some of the colder weather, Pat, and it's going to feel more like November football weather. We do have the college football playoff coming up tonight, but want to remind you today, all the way through Sunday Night Football, you can enjoy Maction coming up tonight from Rambler Sports Bar and Grill there at the Finnick. They're downtown next to Railroad Park, 1630 2nd Avenue South. You might have heard Greg McElroy talk about it. I'll tell you about it all the time. It's the video boards, it's the projector screen, it's the optimum sound quality, the wonderful food and drinks, just a great atmosphere to enjoy time with your family, with your friends. And if you're an avid NFL or college football fan, they've got so many TVs, so many screens to choose from, you're not going to know what to do with yourself. So check out Rambler Sports Bar and Grill. They're open tomorrow, Wednesday lunch through Sunday Night Football. You can check them out there, Rambler Sports Bar and Grill, 1630 2nd Avenue South near Railroad Park.
So Alabama football's Ryan Williams has been named a Biletnikoff semifinalist. He was named a semifinalist today by the Tallahassee Quarterback Club. Williams is one of 11 semifinalists for the Biletnikoff Award, presented annually to the top pass catcher in college football. 3 finalists will be announced on Tuesday, November the 26th, with the winners selected live during the ESPN College Football Awards Show on Thursday, December 12th. So, pretty amazing. Ryan Williams, 17 years old, not quite 18. He is now a semifinalist for the Biletnikoff Award. So that's pretty wild.
It is wild.
Pretty special.
Only 17?
That's what I hear.
He's not playing for Saraland this Friday, is he?
No, he's not. I don't think Spain Park has to worry about trying to cover him.
They still have plenty of weapons
left
in the reservoir.
Yes, they do.
A lot of texts are coming in. We do have the college football playoff unveiling the rankings again tonight. We get on Tuesday nights, and a lot of discussion, and it centers around the SEC. And my prediction is you get 4 in from the SEC, and one SEC team is going to keep another SEC team out. And just based on where they have ranked the Big Ten and how they value the Big Ten, and I mean the committee so far, you would expect the Big Ten is going to get 4 teams in. 205-834-9450. A lot of Tennessee texts rolling in. This is Helena Vol, and he says, hey, guys, as a Vol, what happens if Tennessee goes 10-2, Alabama loses in the SEC championship, and that would give the Tide 3 losses? Do you think the committee puts in Alabama over Tennessee with one more loss and losing the head-to-head?
Yes, I do. It's my opinion. You're going to say I'm biased because I do a show in Alabama, but that's just my thought.
And I think part of what you will get, it will be eye test, and right now Alabama on offense and how good they have looked. The defense has been solid as well. If we want to go back to whether it was Missouri, whether it was the game with LSU, and then they're still going to have implanted in their brain, stamped into their brain, the committee, Tennessee. And losing to a Georgia team, a couple of touchdowns, Pat, and already the preconceived notion based on what we had seen from Georgia that Georgia was off a little bit. This is not your typical Georgia. Worthy of a college football playoff? Probably. But it's not the elite dominant Georgia that we've seen. That's the problem in its perception of human beings that I think that Tennessee fans have to worry about.
And I think that's what people are going to go crazy about, because I do firmly believe that if it's an Alabama or a Georgia, and it's because those are the teams right now, if certain things play out because of the tiebreakers, that's what you're looking at in regards to potentially being in the SEC championship game and losing a third game. And if that were the case, I think the committee is not going to penalize a team that is playing for the Southeastern Conference Championship based on the gauntlet that these teams have had to go through during the regular season. You can call me crazy, you can call me biased, whatever you want to. I equate it to the college basketball, because you remember how many times we get to the championship Sunday and we say, oh, well, if Texas A&M, they've been on this great run in college at the SEC basketball tournament, if they can win, obviously they're going to get the automatic bid for the NCAA tournament. but they get to Sunday, so they should get credit for that, right? Most of that's already done by Friday.
Yeah.
That's overblown. I think the same thing is going to be said about the SEC championship game. Outside of deciding who's going to get the automatic bye in the college football playoff, I don't think they're gonna hurt in Alabama or Georgia by taking a third loss in Atlanta.
And that makes sense because we do get that. Unless you're a team that makes that run through the tournament, and we've even seen it work in reverse, as you mentioned Texas A&M, and still getting left off, and we got Buzz Williams and the dissertation that he gave us prior to their NIT game. But no, you're right. Do they view it that way? Because we're talking about seeding, though, most of the time.
Right.
When it comes to a college basketball team and how they perform in a conference tournament.
Unfortunately,
could they earn their way to a 3 seed, a 4 seed, a 5 seed? Could they come off of that 8-9 line? We're not actually talking about them punching a ticket. We feel pretty confident that they've done enough based on that. Because of the lack of sample size that we get in college football, and with some teams like Texas, this when it comes back to Texas. Let's look at their schedule. And how many times have they been tested? How many different examples do we have of Texas flexing their muscle and showing dominance? Earlier in the season, and that win over Michigan, as impressive as it was at the time in Ann Arbor, Pat, looks a lot different now. Even the Tennessee win head-to-head over Alabama, when people are wondering what's wrong with Jalen Milroe, and then we get the Milroe that we got, maybe not even necessarily against Missouri, but we get the Milroe we got against LSU. And then Milroe, let's just say he balls out in the last 2 games versus OU and at home versus Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
That means something. Eye test and how you're playing, I do believe that whether they say it or not, that's going to factor in, especially when you're trying to pit resumes of 2 SEC teams together. Ryan, thank you for the text. You're a big Vol fan. Don't have time. I'm going to read it all, but I don't have time to do it on the air. He's broken it down in 6 possible scenarios.
Where does he have, in a nutshell, where does he have? Does he have Tennessee in trouble if they went out?
I'll take one of these points. He said, there's no point in thinking SEC at this juncture. That's irrelevant for a team and an at-large bid. So, for example, we're pulling for Georgia Tech over Georgia. It has nothing to do with the fact that Georgia is an SEC team. It has to do with the whole at-large situation. Therefore, we just need those teams in front of us, and he's coming from a Tennessee perspective, who are in that 5-12 range to lose. Here's some of the upcoming games related to the teams that we need to lose. Alabama and Oklahoma or Auburn. You need to lose one of those games. Ole Miss playing Florida. Tennessee, you need to be pulling for Florida. Because I do think, Pat, that Ole Miss, for whatever reason, they have a good chance to stub their toe if they don't go in there and they're focused. And you got a healthy Lagway. That Florida team, when they're playing hard for Napier and they're playing in the swamp, it's a dangerous team if you're a team that doesn't need to lose anymore. And then Notre Dame, he throws out Notre Dame. They have an undefeated Army and USC also remaining on their schedule. But what about that awful loss to Northern Illinois? Unfortunately, the committee has already told us that loss to Northern Illinois didn't really change their opinion of Notre Dame. And then I'm sure that they'll cite a win over Louisville and some of the and they will get credit for beating and they are good, an undefeated Army team if that happens coming up this weekend there in the Bronx. More text rolling in. The talk should be Texas getting the nod because they spent money. The same with Ohio State. No legit wins, just getting the benefit of the doubt. I'm right there with you. If we're going to make the argument against some of these other teams, if Texas ends up with 2 losses, if we're going to make the argument against some, why is Texas getting a dadgum pass? And will they get a pass if they lose to Texas A&M and College Station? I don't know. But it seems like right now, Pat, and I know they're a member of the SEC, but it seems like they're getting the benefit of the doubt on a lot of this. When the truest test that we have seen was at home in a game that had all kinds of buildup, and Georgia came in and took your lunch money and made you like it for 4 quarters.
Yeah, they did. And you mentioned this earlier. So ESPN right now is projecting that the SEC has an 83% chance of getting 4 or more teams in the college football playoff. The Big Ten has an 80% chance to get 4 or more. So the SEC, according to ESPN, has better odds of getting 4 or more teams, more so than the Big Ten.
What was the percentage?
83% for the SEC, 80% for the Big Ten to get 4 or more teams. Meanwhile, the SEC and the Big Ten both have a 99% chance of getting 3 or more teams. So then the discrepancy would come down to 4 or more.
Yeah. They're getting 4 or more in. I just never really bought into, unless it's just a horrible year outside of the SEC and the Big Ten, that you're going to get 5 teams in.
Yeah.
And I understand the argument for fans of other schools outside the conference, but when it comes down to strength of schedule, which we don't know, we just have to be smart college football fans and use our eye tests and base results to formulate our opinions. But not getting that from the committee just sucks. It does.
Yeah.
It sucks. Even if we don't like it, at least tell us this team was in the ballpark with this other team that you put them in over, where eyeballs tell you they had identical resume and you could split hairs. But we'll never know that.
Yeah.
More from the text line. It says Florida went from being a disappointment to being dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chill. His prediction for the playoff: Ohio State, Alabama, Miami, and Colorado with first-round byes.
Ooh.
Then he's got Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Ole Miss at 9, Georgia at 10, Indiana 11, Boise 12.
Some really good scenarios. The listeners are as educated as anybody in America when it comes to this.
Anthony, optimistic Auburn fan, says that to me, the teams that are potentially left out are either Ole Miss or Tennessee. I take Tennessee simply because Ole Miss losses are the worst losses of the current 2-loss teams in the Southeastern Conference. Yeah, it's really tough, though, when you talk about Ole Miss and going to Tiger Stadium and losing to LSU, that now we're considering that one of the worst losses.
Yeah.
So if we're calling that a worse loss, how much credit are we giving Alabama for blowing the doors off of LSU? This one rolls in. If Bama slips up, loses to Auburn, does Bama still get in the college football playoff?
No, not at all.
The only outside chance if Alabama is to make the college football playoff with 3 losses is an SEC championship game, where you could still hold out hope as an Alabama fan.
Now, in every scenario that we have given out over the last week or so, it is obviously Alabama has to win the remaining 2 games. There is no more mulligans. This is it. If they lose, they're done. They're out. End of discussion. But if you beat your next 2 opponents, you have the inside track of going to the Southeastern Conference championship game, and then at that point in time, that's when the fun really would begin, because if you don't win and get an automatic bye to the CFP, then are you going to be put in as a 3-loss team?
This one rolls in and says, Mike Griffith, like some others, has this completely backwards. I'm sure the committee members think that most of the 2-loss SEC teams are better than some of the teams ranked just ahead of them. That's their opinion, but they're putting their opinions aside and ranking the teams where the teams have played themselves to so far. Griffith and others have it backwards and can't even see it.
Okay, so you tell me right now, who would Penn State or Indiana be ranked, not ranked, but favored from a Vegas perspective over Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, or Georgia?
Depends on where the game's played, but
play them in Happy Valley and Bloomington.
They wouldn't be. Penn State, maybe. Because didn't we have a hypothetical that came out with Ole Miss going to Happy Valley and
it was like a 2 or 3 point spread?
Penn State, right? Indiana, no, they would not get any love as far as Vegas line if they set those for those games. This one rolls in and says the narrative has always been the Big Ten is top heavy. Big 12 plays no defense, but the SEC is balanced and anybody can beat anybody. Now Texas doesn't play anybody.
Well, I think what Landry was talking about is based on their current schedule for 2024.
Yeah, we're just comparing resumes. And their best win is Vanderbilt.
Yeah. Vandy comes in at number 31 as opposed to Michigan that is now ranked, what, in the 50s or 60s according to The Athletic.
We're not having this conversation if they don't go out and lay a you-know-what at home to Georgia. It's not even that Georgia beat them. Made a drive and hit a field goal at the horn. At one point in that game, Quinn Ewers, what was his stats? He was like 6 of 15 for 17 yards.
It was terrible. Awful.
Against this Georgia team. And you can make the argument for Texas, well, that was earlier in the season. And golly, they've looked so strong since that point. Does a 10-point win on the road at Arkansas, does that scream dominance? Ole Miss would say, no, we can show you what we did in Reynolds Razorback Stadium. We beg to differ. And then if Georgia had continued to just mow through everyone and look like the Georgia team that we've seen in the past, Texas would probably have more of an argument. But even after that, you got a Georgia team that rolls into Oxford and gets beat by 3 scores.
Yeah.
Hard to support it.
Whether your family rolls with the Tide or yells War Eagle, there's only one place to shop, and that's Bama Fever Tiger Pride. We have got Black Friday coming up. We've got the Iron Bowl coming up. We've got college football playoff, bowl games. Get a fresh stock of great looks of sweatshirts, jackets, quarter zips, vests, as well as everyday items like T-shirts, hats, polos, tailgate gear. Go by and see one of their 9 locations across the state of Alabama, Bama Fever Tiger Pride. They've been in business for over 40 years, and the people of the state of Alabama have been just absolutely incredible patrons to this institution. Bama Fever Tiger Pride. Go by and see them. Get ready for all your game day gear. Support your school. That's Bama Fever Tiger Pride. More three-man front. We're live at Social Taco in Homewood. This is Jocks 94.5. A really nice crowd as usual here on Taco Tuesday. Three-man front. We're live at Social Taco. Come by and see us. We'll be here until 2 o'clock today. The lunch crowd is busy as always. It's ugly outside, but plenty of seating available here at Social Taco. We're located on the second floor here on the Taco Terrace. When it comes to plumbing, always have a pro on standby. That's Iron Mountain Drains and Plumbing, rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. They're family-owned and operated. They handle everything: faucet repairs, water heater maintenance, commercial plumbing, sewer line repairs, and so much more. One call does it all. Iron Mountain Drains and Plumbing, 205-516-4927 or ironmountainworld.com. We've been spending a lot of time talking about tonight's college football playoff selection show, which this will be the third edition that will be happening tonight. I want to take you back to Between the Hedges on Saturday night. So Kirby Smart, he was on the field after the big win against the Tennessee Vols. Listen to what Kirby had to say in regards to the College Football Playoff Committee and some of the things that they had to say about his Georgia Bulldogs.
What do you think you showed the committee tonight?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know what they look for. I really don't know what they look for anymore. So I would welcome anybody in that committee to come down to this league and play in this environment. So it's a tough place to play.
There you go. That's Kirby Smart. Not mincing words whatsoever in regards to what the committee had to say last week. If you remember last week, Warren Manuel, they had a comment, a negative comment about the Georgia Bulldogs offense. And so with that being said, Kirby Smart took the opportunity with Laura Rutledge after the game, Landrum, in which he basically says, I have no idea what the College Football Playoff Committee wants. I just invite them to come down here and play in the SEC and play this tough schedule.
Yeah. There's fair or unfair. You're never going to be able to convince me that playing an SEC schedule, like the schedule that Georgia has played, or even to some extent that Alabama has played, or some of the other teams, it's not equal. But there's also, are we pretending that all Power 4 conferences are equal?
No.
You're going to make the argument for the ACC, although they're the Power 4. So when people have such a problem with the SEC and why do they get 4 teams in? Okay, well, how many teams from the ACC right now would you say are college football playoff worthy?
SMU, Miami.
Is that it?
That's it. In my opinion.
You feel really strong about SMU and Miami?
Well, I mean, Miami's a top 10 team. I mean, they come in at number 9. You got SMU at 14. Clemson is top 25. They're number 20.
Okay.
But for the purposes of this exercise, I'm talking about the top 12 or basically the top 10, so to speak.
What was Miami's most impressive win? Was it the 52-45 win at Louisville? Or was it the opening game of the season versus Florida?
So Louisville right now, according to The Athletic, is the 32nd best team in college football.
Okay, so it would be Louisville.
Right.
And winning that game.
It ain't Florida. Florida's 43.
Where would you pit the loss at Georgia Tech?
Well, let's see where Georgia Tech ranks. Number 33.
Okay, number 33.
Mm-hmm.
So they would be somewhere in that Arkansas range.
Arkansas's 37.
Somewhere in the Vanderbilt range.
Vanderbilt's 31.
Okay, but then if we're going to say, okay, what's the impressive wins? Is winning at Louisville and surrendering 45 points and scoring 52, is that more impressive than Alabama or Ole Miss beating a Georgia team at home?
No.
Winning by 1 point and having to come back to do it at Cal, we'll give you credit for doing that, but winning 39-38, is that how about at home against Virginia Tech in a game that some people still believe that you lost, winning that game 38-34? So if we want to go down that road, we can. ACC folks, haven't heard a whole lot of outcry from the folks in the ACC. And to be quite honest, haven't heard a whole lot of outcry from the Big 12.
Because I think the Big 12 knows that they're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you what, let's listen to Kenny Dillingham. He is the head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils. And so he was asked yesterday about all these different playoff scenarios that involves Arizona State and potentially getting to the Big 12 championship game and the CFP and all that. This is just a great answer. This is Kenny Dillingham. He is the head football coach of Arizona State.
Oh, I have no clue. I literally have no. Somebody was telling me if we win and somebody else loses, and then like ranch dressing falls on a wing, I don't really know. It just play the very best you can play, prepare the very best you can prepare, and like I told the guys last week in my leadership council meeting, like don't get lost in the sauce. Like just be the very best we can be over and over again, and wherever we end up is the best we could have ever done. That's it. Like, you can wish and hope, but if you just play the very best you can play and prepare the very best you can prepare, then regardless of what happens, it's the very maximum you could have ever achieved anyways. So what else do you want? So I have no clue the tiebreaker. Some of the players probably do. I couldn't even tell you.
I need more Kenny Dillinghams in my life.
He's great. He's awesome. Okay, so you go from Kenny Dillingham. That was his response. This is Rhett Lashley, former Auburn OC. He's done an incredible job there.
Oh, so was Kenny Dillingham. He just didn't get to call plays. Oh, that's right. Neither did Rhett.
That's right. That's interesting. All right, so here's Rhett Lashley, the head football coach of SMU. This is what he had to say about all this shade that's being thrown at the Atlantic Coast Conference.
There's conference biases. And I think it's interesting that, you look at the ACC, we have a winning record against the Big Ten this year. We have a winning record against the Big 12 this year. We don't have a winning record against the SEC, but we have 4 games left, and if we win enough of those, we would have a winning record. So that's still up in the air. It's been competitive. And, so to look at our league and say, well, we may be a one-bid league, but you look at another league that we have a winning record against and say, oh, they're going to get 4 in. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It needs to make it make sense. When other leagues beat each other up internally, they're considered a deep, solid league. When we beat up internally, we're considered a weak league. When Kentucky goes and beats Ole Miss, when Arkansas goes and beats Tennessee, when South Carolina goes and beats A&M, when Vandy beats Alabama, that's considered a deep league. When Georgia Tech beats Miami, right? When Louisville goes on the road and beats Clemson, when UVA goes on the road and beats Pitt, we're not considered a deep league. I think we're a pretty deep league. And so I just want our league to get the same respect that everyone else gets.
You agree or disagree?
Some aspects of it I agree with, but again, if we're going to use the entire Big Ten and your league versus theirs as an argument, well, show me those games. Show me those teams. Show me those wins. Because we're talking about a Big Ten. Nobody's making the argument that the Big Ten from top to bottom is the best in college football. So where are those wins versus the Big Ten that – look, I think what he's done there is incredible, and I would not be willing to say there's absolutely no way that SMU belongs in a college football playoff. You just have to be very, very careful when you start blanketing, and we're all guilty of it, but start blanketing and assuming that your record against a certain conference is superior to another's when you're not citing particular matchups and games.
So if I were to tell you on Tennessee's schedule currently, how many wins do you think they currently have over a team that is above 500?
Tennessee? Mm-hmm. Above 500, so 5-5 doesn't count.
That is correct. How many teams currently on Tennessee's football schedule that they have already played do they currently own a above 500 record?
I will go 3? 2.
1.
Okay.
And you'll never guess the one team. The University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. They've got 6 wins. And Tennessee beat them 69-3 to start the season. NC State is 500. Kent State's the worst team in all of college football. Oklahoma's 500. Arkansas 500. Florida 500. Alabama winning record. Kentucky. Mississippi State. All under 500. So Chattanooga and Bama. I meant to say outside of Alabama, obviously, because they beat a team above 500. So 2 teams on their schedule above 500, but only one Power 4 team above 500.
Yikes. It's not great. I did like how he took the opportunity to go ahead and say ACC versus Big Ten, and then he just cited specific how we view the Southeastern Conference when Vandy gets a win over in Alabama or one of those other games that we've seen so far this season.
So, once again, Tennessee has 1 win against a Power 4 opponent with a winning record. And then if you include FCS, it would be 2, because Chattanooga and Alabama. But everybody else, they've got 3 teams that are currently at 500, and it could be improved or could go worse. But so when you're having that debate with your neighbors or friends about Tennessee football, just keep that in mind. Because we'll never see the strength of schedule or any of the other data points.
No.
So we're just trying to have this discussion. More 3-man front. We're live at Social Taco. Come by and see us. Really nice crowd coming in here on a very nasty, ugly day outside, but we're having a good time here at Social Taco. This is Jocks 94.5. It is 12:36. Jocks 94.5. Pat Smith, Landrum Roberts. We're live at Social Taco. Joining us now on the Buyers Right Hotline, outstanding senior writer of college football there at ESPN, ESPN.com. Adam Rittenberg joins us here on Three Man Front. Well, the anticipation is building, Adam. This has become a tradition on Tuesday nights with this CFP breakdown tonight in the rankings. Your anticipation tonight, do you see a shakeup somewhere in that top 12, the top 25? How do you see this going tonight?
Yeah, it's always a little bit instructive. I always caution people not to get too carried away with how things are here on November 19th because we still have two very important sets of rankings to go. But, I think there shouldn't be a ton of movement up top. Georgia likely is moving up, maybe significantly after their performance against Tennessee. I think where the certain SEC contenders fall, given Tennessee beat Alabama, but Alabama beat Georgia, but Georgia beat Tennessee, but Ole Miss beat Georgia, but obviously lost to two teams that are clearly out of the playoff mix. That's going to be interesting. Interesting to see where SMU is at. I think SMU is a team that's being kind of criminally overlooked nationally, and maybe will continue to be with them having lost to a BYU team that now has its own loss. So there's a lot of interesting things maybe after the number 5 or number 6 line to observe tonight.
Adam, which SEC fan base at this point in the season with the rankings coming out tonight should be more nervous as to their team getting into the college football playoff? Would it be Ole Miss fans or Tennessee fans?
Well, I think it's possibly Tennessee fans. And my issue with Tennessee, and I tweeted about this earlier today, guys, is that I really look for, who is the complete team right now. And of all the contenders in the SEC, with Alabama's improvement defensively, it's hard to say that they're not a complete team. Georgia, they had some issues on offense. Carson Beck's throwing interceptions left and right. Well, he goes out and plays one of his best games as a Bulldog against, obviously, a really good Tennessee defense. Ole Miss has these bad losses. They can't get rid of those. It's a stench on them. But in terms of their talent on offense and defense, you talk to coaches in the league, you watch the games, they look like a complete team. My issue with Tennessee is that they're not a complete team right now. They have a terrific defense, one of the best in the country, and it's crazy to say this, but their offense is just not playoff caliber, at least from what I've seen in SEC play. They've had one game against the worst team in the league where they've scored more than 28 points in conference. And, they've played a tough schedule, but they haven't played Ole Miss and Texas A&M and some of these other teams. So I'm concerned because the Tennessee offense that we saw those first 3 games has disappeared. And sure, they're going to score a lot against UTEP this week, but I really think Tennessee needs to beat Vanderbilt and score points against Vanderbilt to reassure any potential concerns about them in that committee room.
Okay, so listen, we've been debating this, Adam, for some time now, and it appears right now if Alabama wins their next 2 games, they're heading to Atlanta. Then the big question is going to be, if they lose the SEC championship game, do we have the likelihood of a 3-loss SEC team, a runner-up in the SEC, end up being held out of the CFP? Where do you currently stand with that in regards to Alabama?
Yeah, in regards to Alabama, I don't think it's going to keep them out. You look at who they've beaten this year. Georgia, one of the best wins in the country. They shut out Missouri. They have blowout wins. I think that matters, is that they've had blowout wins against ranked teams, the teams that were ranked by the committee at the time, and their only 2 losses are single digits on the road. I don't think that they're the type of team that would get knocked out based on a loss in the SEC championship game. If they get blown out, I guess it's possible, but I would still think the committee would look at what they've done and certainly how they've performed since the Tennessee game and really defensively since the Vandy game and say that's a team that belongs in this field regardless of the results in Atlanta. It may not be the case for everybody that's in that game, but I think for Alabama, they would get the benefit of the doubt.
Adam, you just mentioned it, and I agree. It's who is the complete team. Would you define Miami, a 1-loss Miami team right now, as a complete team that you would have in your college football playoff?
No, I wouldn't. But again, I think for Miami, it's just very cut and dry. They've got to win the ACC, and for SMU as well. With a loss, again, a loss that I don't think is getting appreciated enough, and certainly what they've followed that loss with in terms of going undefeated in the ACC. But yeah, Miami has been very limited at times, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They've been very fortunate that they didn't lose the game, and then they finally did. Excuse me, against Georgia Tech. So yeah, I think Miami is a limited team that might win the ACC. I think SMU, to be honest, is a more complete team that might win the ACC. But we know that only one of them can, and only one of them will be going to the playoffs.
Adam, let me ask you about the Big Ten, because that's a hot topic down here in the Deep South in regards to how this has already been baked in with Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana, 4 of the top 5 coming from the Big Ten. What happens if Indiana gets curb stomped this weekend by Ohio State, and then Indiana finishes the regular season by beating nobody on the upper half of the Big Ten? What do you do with Indiana? Is Indiana safe based on the rankings that we see currently?
Yeah, I don't think they are. I think they need to perform well this week. I think they need to show why a lot of us feel that they belong in the playoffs in terms of how they perform against Ohio State. This is a team that leads the nation in rushing defense. They've been terrific on third down. They've checked almost every box that you can. And yes, the schedule is easy, but I'll give you an example. Ohio State struggled to beat Nebraska. Okay, this is a Nebraska team that has talent. Dylan Raiola's there. They can't get out of their own way. Ohio State was struggling to beat them. You know what Indiana did to them the week before? They beat them by 49 points. I mean, so they have taken advantage of the schedule, but they're not eking by anyone. Now, the problem for them is if they struggle big time against Ohio State, people are going to look at the last 3 halves. That second half against Michigan where they struggled to do anything offensively, and then presumably this entire game against Ohio State, and say, you know what, that's the type of talent that they're going to face in the college football playoffs. If they didn't perform well in the second half against Michigan and throughout the game in Columbus, how are they going to hold up against those types of opponents? So that's why, again, I think how they look, even if they don't win, is going to be really, really important for Coach Sig's team on Saturday.
How many other teams in the college football playoff conversation, Adam, would you say right now has that same worry about eye tests and how you look against certain teams in your final couple of games, and in some cases maybe just one game of your regular season? How many teams do you feel like are in that boat if you're putting yourself in the committee's seat?
Right. Well, I think we all are assuming that the Texas and Texas A&M winner will get into the playoff, and that the loser is probably out. Certainly, if it's A&M. So it's hard for me to put them in that conversation. But I think from a Texas standpoint, and I talked with Steve McKeegan about this earlier in the week, they want to get going offensively. They feel really good about their defense. The offense has been there at times. It hasn't been there at other times. I really think the 2 teams that are in that category, though, are Indiana and Tennessee. Indiana's got to play well this week against Ohio State. Tennessee's got to show something offensively, I really believe, against a Vanderbilt team that is solid on defense. So, if Tennessee, they'll win this game easily this week, but if they beat Vanderbilt, 17-14, I don't know if that's going to help them, in the eyes of the committee, if it's really that close for a final spot. And then Notre Dame's another one. Notre Dame needs to win out. We all know that. I think Notre Dame has been really dominant in doing so, and they have 2 games to really impress the committee here down the stretch against an undefeated Army team this weekend at Yankee Stadium, and then going out to L.A. to face a USC team that still has a lot of talent and can score points. And so Notre Dame and their defense has really led the way, but how definitive they look in victory is going to help them with the committee.
Talking to Adam Rittenberg, outstanding college football writer for ESPN, ESPN.com, joining us here on 3-Man Front. So let me ask you about the Heisman Trophy, because Ashton Jeanty has just put in like Barry Sanders-like numbers out in the Pacific Northwest. Talk to us about him in regards to the likelihood of him winning the Heisman Trophy. Obviously, you've got a pair of guys there in Boulder, Colorado that's going to have a lot to do with this, but I think most of America, maybe on this side of the Mississippi, don't get an opportunity to see Jeanty play enough, but he is putting up some incredible numbers there for Boise.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, again, he's a workhorse. I mean, typically 31, 33, 34, 32 carries, especially here in the second half of the season. His volume of rushes has actually gone up as the season has gone on, and his low rushing output is 128 yards in a really good win over UNLV. So, again, every week he brings it. 7.4 yards a carry, 26 touchdowns. He regularly, guys, rushes for 3 touchdowns a game. So, and again, I think they did a nice job in marketing him. I was at the Mountain West Media Days, which were right after the Big 12 Media Days in Las Vegas. Ashton, because he's not 21 years old, couldn't do a media day in a casino space. So they had him in a different hotel doing his own media day. So they've got his name out there a little bit. He's a terrific guy. He's a great story because, again, Jacksonville, Florida, was in Texas, easily could have left for name your Power 4 school, decided to stay at Boise State, and now he's going to go down as one of the greatest players in team history, maybe a Heisman Trophy winner. So it's a really cool story. He's a guy I know they have a lot of late games, but I know they play on Black Friday. They're going to be playing in the Mountain West Championship game. He's worth checking out if you're an SEC fan just because of how talented he is.
Well, it's so great to talk actual football with Adam because it seems like, Adam, the last couple of times you've joined us, we've been talking about realignment and everything else that's been going on. So it's nice to actually talk some football with you in this November day. So we appreciate it as always and look forward to our next visit.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. That is Adam Rittenberg joining us on the Buyers Right Insurance Hotline for all your insurance, financial, and HR needs. It's Buyers Right Insurance, a Higginbotham partner.
Well, with the holidays just around the corner, look at Dobbs Ford right there on Parkway East in Birmingham, the Goshen family. Awesome people, Joey and Rachel, his wife. They're the managing partners there. Austin heads up the sales department, but the entire team there at Dobbs Ford, they're going to take care of you. You're going to get total transparency throughout the whole process, top dollar for your trade, and they're going to beat any competitor's price. Check out Alabama's largest showroom selection. You can go to the website, DobbsFordBirmingham.com. Whether it's the F-150s, the souped-up F-150s, the Dobbs edition that I've driven, also the Bronco Dobbs edition, the Black Diamond version of that awesome Bronco Sports, Explorers, Mustangs. You can check it out, DobbsFordBirmingham.com. Go see and feel the difference. Dobbs Ford, Parkway East in Birmingham, and make sure that you tell them that Landrum from Jocks 94.5 sent you.
We're here for another hour and 12 minutes. Come by and see us. Have a late lunch. We're at Social Taco on Homewood. This is Jocks 94.5. So we had some basketball news last night. The Auburn Tigers took out North Alabama 102-69. Janai Broome, what a huge game. 30 points, 17 rebounds. The Tigers cruised to a 4-0 record. They're off to the Maui Invitational next week. So this schedule's going to get a lot more difficult for the Auburn Tigers. But so far, the number 3, number 4 team in America, depending on what poll you look at, they're 4-0. Big win against North Alabama. UAB, they get a win down at Bartow last night, 109-64 against Auburn University Montgomery. Jabari McGee led the Blazers with 25 points. Most points scored by a UAB basketball team since the 2022-23 season. The Blazers are now 3-2. They're off to the Virgin Islands this weekend.
Not a bad place to go.
No.
Are they going to be, where are they going to be?
The Paradise Jam in St. Thomas.
St. Thomas? Nice.
A place that you and I have visited.
Mm-hmm.
You on honeymoon, me on a vacation.
Go to Red Hook.
That's right. Charlotte Armalay.
Everything's really expensive there, Pat.
Yes, it is.
I went to the grocery store. You think inflation's bad over here?
And you know where they get all their stuff? I think I've told you the story. They get everything from Puerto Rico.
Okay.
That comes over on barges. Newspapers, most grocery items, things of that nature.
Well, flu season is ramping up, so make your home healthier with Trane's Clean Effects Home Air Cleaner. It removes up to 99.9% of airborne particles, including those that cause virus, is 100 times more effective than standard air filters and 8 times more effective than HEPA room filters. So find a dealer near you at Trane.com.
She wasn't very impressed by that.
She's kind of, is that one of the few places that Molly has never been?
Huh. She's like, huh.
Molly, have you been to the Virgin Islands?
No, I have not, but my parents have been.
See, that's why she scoffed at it, Pat.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
She would have said, "Oh, I've been there."
There's very few
we had a great
places in
time
the
there.
world that we can say that we have been and she has not been.
That is true.
And that is one of them.
If any member of our show ever goes to Antarctica, it will be Molly first. She'll go on one of those ice cutting cruise liners.
You know what's so funny about that, Landrum?
You've been online trying
You're
to
already
book
on
one?
a trip?
No, my brother's been to Antarctica.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like not even kidding.
So he did the little thing from one of the Norwegian boats. Was it a Norwegian cruise liner?
I don't know. I was really young when he went. It was some type of liner. I don't think it was Norwegian, but he has been to Antarctica. So
that's impressive.
That is impressive. Just to say that you set foot on Antarctica, that would be cool for about 15 seconds.
And just check that box and just move along after you do that.
I mean, I don't want to make a day out of it.
You just want to say that you stepped foot on another continent.
Yeah. Why not?
No. I get it.
Now, I have no desire to go to like Greenland or to go sailing by the Flemish Cap, which ultimately that met the Andrea Gale's demise when they went and they chased all those fish.
Or Cape Good Horn.
Cape Good Horn.
Yeah.
Nope.
No thanks.
No, I was watching a documentary on terrorism in the 80s, and we know that there was a lot of hijacking of planes back then, and it was a plane that was forced to land in Malta. Fascinating. I'll have to brief you about it in the break.
Please do.
If I can stop coughing. That time of year, right?
You've rebounded nicely.
I have.
You were in bad shape yesterday.
Man, modern medicine has come a long way.
It sure has.
Now, I would fail the P test if we were doing like weightlifting. I get some steroids in the system.
I can tell you're a little bit more aggressive with people here at Social Taco today. I can tell that. Coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to go to Gainesville, Florida. Man, this program is on the rise. Talking about Sunbelt Billy, everything that he has been able to do so far. Knocking off LSU last weekend. They've got the Ole Miss Rebels coming in, and then they've got Florida State. FSU Dave's already been over here talking about how FSU is going to knock off Florida at the end of the season to ruin Sunbelt Billy's career. So we'll talk to David Waters, Gators Breakdown podcast. He will join us next to talk about what has changed and the future for Sunbelt Billy and Billy Napier. Pat Smith, Landrum Roberts, we're live at Social Taco. Molly Robinson as well. One more hour to go, then the Paul Feinbaum Show will take you home this afternoon. This is Jocks 94.5 right here from Social Taco. Pat, Landrum, Molly, the whole gang, come by and see us. We'll be here until 1 o'clock here at Social Taco. This is Jocks 94.5.
Welcome back in. It's Three Man Front. We're live from Social Taco in Homewood. We're Gringo, PG, FSU, Dave, a guy that I need to meet. I'm guessing that's Steve from Tuscaloosa. BB, our buddy Chris, Crimson Convict. Don't know that gentleman, though he looks like he's done well in life. And also Don is here as well. We've had other folks. Jody, he stopped by, and a few other listeners. You know what? All things considered, and it's raining here in the square in Homewood. It's dry inside, but I like the turnout.
Very much so.
Gamers, no fair weather fans here at Social Taco. And by the way, at Social Taco, we're going to broadcast until 2. You got the half-off happy hour 3 to 6 Monday through Friday. But don't forget about the Bottomless Tapas Brunch, 10 to 2:30 Saturday and Sunday. Also, you will enjoy the mimosas, which will be flowing, the Bloody Marias, the Bloody Marys, and it's a great time. So come in on Saturday and Sunday as well and enjoy the Bottomless Tapas Brunch. SocialTaco.bar for more information, Pat.
So earlier this morning, the University of Texas and Notre Dame, they announced a home-and-home series with each other. In 2028, Texas will head to Notre Dame. The preceding year, which will be the 2029 season, Texas will host the Fighting Irish. So that was a big announcement earlier this morning. Also, FanDuel has Alabama installed as a 15.5-point home favorite for this year's Iron Bowl. Auburn is plus 520 on the money line, and the total is 52.5 points. So we will talk to Brian Edwards from Vegas Insider tomorrow on the program, and we'll get his thoughts on the upcoming Iron Bowl line, which is still a week and a half away, but if you want to get some action in on that early. Last night, Monday Night Football, no big surprise. The Texans knock off the Cowboys 34-10. Texans 24-point win, their largest in a road game since 2015 as a franchise. Joe Mixon, 20 rushes, 109 yards, 3 touchdowns. Had a heck of a night. C.J. Stroud, 23 of 34, 257, interception. First career win with 0 passing touchdowns for C.J. Stroud. Meanwhile, the Cowboys just gets worse and worse. So, they opened the roof last night at Jerry World, and you had panels falling down on the field. So not only is the football, obviously, franchise having some struggles, now the stadium is, but it's the Cowboys' 5th straight loss, their longest single-season losing streak since 2015. It was their 6th straight home game in which they've trailed by 20-plus points. That's including the playoffs, extending the longest streak in NFL history. And on top of that, the Cowboys become the first team in NFL history. They find themselves 0-5 at home this season. First time that has ever happened to them, to start off 0-5 at home since 1989. And it was their first season under the ownership of Jerry Jones when that happened. Cooper Rush threw 55 passes last night. He was 32 of 55 for 354 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Joining us now on the Bars Right Hotline from the Gators Breakdown podcast. Excited to talk to David because last time we talked to David, it was not looking very good for this Florida football program. But, David, man, what a difference a couple wins makes as the Gators knock off LSU.
Yeah, certainly a game Billy Napier had to have. This LSU team did seem beatable, but, still considered better than Florida coming in. So it was a game, Billy Napier just finally had to get a win, against a team that was perceived better than Florida. You had him at home. DJ Lagway was returning. It was a game, in a lot of ways, just to get some of the pressure off, have an exhale moment. I think that's kind of what Saturday turned out to be for the Gators.
David, how optimistic are you, given the way that Florida is playing right now? You look at Ole Miss, and you could argue that they're playing as well or better than anybody in the SEC, maybe in the country, given the last 2 games, the win over Georgia, dominating performance and putting up a whole bunch of points against Arkansas. They're going to have Trey Harris back, but what is the perception right now of this Florida fan base and the folks that you talk to on a daily basis and the realistic chance that Florida not only could become bowl eligible, but also spoil a college football playoff aspirations of the Ole Miss Rebels?
Guys, I think what's the old adage say? If you got a quarterback, you got a chance.
Yeah.
So I think, with Lagway coming back and the explosivity that he brings to the table with this at the quarterback spot, I think it makes Gator Nation feel a little bit better about Ole Miss coming in. Now, I don't know many people will be picking the upset, but you certainly feel a lot better about your chances of it happening. And look, the transitive property can get you in trouble in college football, but you look at Ole Miss's losses to Kentucky and LSU, and that's two teams Florida has beaten, and really put it to Kentucky earlier this year. So you don't want to look at too many games that way, but if you want to compare some things, there's one comparison for some of the similar opponents there. So of course, Ole Miss has got look, when you get to November, this team hasn't been in that position. Lane Kiffin, as a head coach, hasn't been in that position where you're riding on a college football playoff berth. So does the pressure get to them at all? But yeah, I think Florida's certainly looking at it too as well. Let's get bowl eligible before we even play FSU in the season opener. In the season on a high note. Now, a lot of people will look at this and say if you play Ole Miss close, that's another trend in the right direction. Florida's had some close losses to Tennessee and to Georgia, some of the better teams in the country. But last week they finally got a payoff. They finally got to play good and get a win out of it. We'll see if Florida can kind of continue the momentum. Momentum has been something that has kind of escaped Billy Napier in his tenure so far at Florida. Now, that's not to say look, Ole Miss can just simply be better than Florida, and that doesn't necessarily mean Florida's momentum or Florida's not mature enough to go win. LSU can be, or Ole Miss can be just that good, but you do at least want to go put a good performance out there to kind of continue the trend that we've seen from about the last month for this Gator team.
David Waters joins us, the Gators Breakdown podcast here on Three Man Front on Jocks 94.5. All right, so I wanted to ask you, what has been the key to the Gators' latest success? Has it been the fact that obviously Lagway has really come on top the last couple of weeks? Obviously he was injured in the Georgia game and then not available for the Texas game. But what has been the key to Florida's success here in the second half of the season?
Yeah, the Lagway's the obvious part of it, but I think going to the other part, I think it's trenches and defense. The offensive line has progressed since we saw him earlier in the season against Miami and against Texas A&M. DJ Lagway does help that bunch a bit. So since he can escape the pocket, maneuver in the pocket, and still throw a ball 40 yards down the field for an accurate throw. But the defense, I think that's where it goes. Ever since that first bye week, they have really turned it around, played some really good defense, had 7 sacks versus LSU Saturday, and LSU had 6 sacks in the whole season coming in. Florida dominated up front the second half of that game, really had a bend-don't-break approach. Anytime LSU got down deep into Florida territory, the Florida defense stood strong, held LSU to 2 made field goals, 1 missed field goal, only 1 touchdown in the game. And it's kind of just continued. They've improved so much in rush defense from where they were at the beginning of the season, have limited big plays. Still an issue, but a lot better than what it had been. So I think, honestly, besides Lagway, I would pinpoint it on the defense. This defense has played better to help their offense out a bit.
David Waters, part of the Gators Breakdown, joining us here on Three Man Front. All of our guests join us on the Buyers Right hotline. We get another weekly reveal of the college football playoff rankings tonight, and we're discussing the SEC and going resume versus resume. If we just go SEC specific right now, who would your 4 teams that you would absolutely, with no hesitation, be from the SEC to put in the college football playoff, and who would be the one team in your mind to be left out?
Ooh, that's a good one. Georgia, Bama, Ole Miss, and Texas. Tennessee outside looking in right now for me. That's kind of tough, and I'm a big believer in Texas's schedule really does hurt them, but the only 1 loss right now. So if they finish with 1 loss, you throw them in there. So that would be mine right now. Tennessee on the outside looking in, given my 4. I just think right now, I know Tennessee beat Alabama. It's kind of round robin right now. I know Tennessee beat Alabama, but Alabama beat Georgia. Georgia just beat Tennessee. So it's just kind of how it goes right now. But that would be mine. I think Ole Miss is sitting pretty right now as well to finish out the season.
All right, so would your opinion change if Alabama gets to the SEC championship game and they take a 3rd loss, leaving Atlanta? Would that put them out of the CFP, in your opinion?
I know that's been a popular talk of conversation. I don't think you should be penalized for making it to an extra game and losing it. Maybe in blowout fashion, sure. I think you can see it. But if it's a hard-fought game and it's a fourth-quarter knockdown, drag-out, I do not think you can penalize the runner-up in the SEC and dropping them out of the playoff because of an extra game. They had to take a risk and go and play it.
You know, David, we were talking about the hot seat, and we were almost certain that Billy Napier was going to be out at one point this season. Arkansas's Sam Pittman. A lot of that conversation, though, has died down. Do you expect at least one coach to either walk away or be asked to leave this year in the SEC, or do you think it just all builds up for 2025, and that's where we see some movement at the end of that season?
Yeah, I think it's building up for 2025. We had a really good discussion with a lawyer here in Jacksonville who studies education and employment and all that kind of stuff, and he really has zeroed in on the college football aspect of it and with the way this revenue sharing and stuff's going to happen, and the school's going to be having a tab of about $20 million at some point next summer. I think that's going to hold a lot of these schools back from having to pay a buyout and spending money in places where, go spend it on a roster instead. If you're 50-50 on a coach, go buy a roster and help that coach out for this coming up year. Maybe have some patience upcoming for this upcoming year. And as you said, when everything kind of settles down, go after next summer, then probably make your move. Now, we could be looking at a huge influx here in the SEC when you're looking at the programs who could be making a move. Of course, Florida, if Billy Napier doesn't get it done next year, Sam Pittman at Arkansas, Brent Venables at Oklahoma. I mean, you could have three programs right there just in the conference. And if somebody else, falls on their face next year. But I think those are the three programs we'd be looking at about a year from now of where they are at in win-loss record and bringing back a coach. So I do think it's interesting, and I do think because of everything off the football field, all the money, everything trying to be figured out through Congress and NIL and paying players and all that, I think you're seeing some programs have some patience right now to kind of see how things are going to play out before they go spend big money on a buyout and then have to go purchase another coaching staff as well.
All right, David, I got to ask you this question. We had a talk show host on from Norman, Oklahoma, and before he left the show, he told us that the rumor making the rounds there in Norman was that Dan Mullen potentially could be the next offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. Just a couple minutes ago at Brent Venables' weekly press conference, he was asked if Dan Mullen was going to be the next offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, and this is a direct quote from Brent Venables. "I'm not going to comment about the details of the search. I reached out to him a year ago." End of quote. So apparently he had kicked the tires on Dan Mullen last year, and either Dan Mullen said, "I'm okay doing TV," or whatever the case may be, but he did not end up in Norman. If he were to come back to college, how do you think Dan Mullen would be as a coordinator, something he has not done in a very long time because he has been the CEO? I know he called offense as well at Mississippi State and obviously there at Florida at times, but how do you think he would do in this league as an OC as opposed to a head coach?
Guys, I'm going to sit here and say I'm trying to find it right now. I had gotten a message early this morning on the same exact storyline, the same exact topic. Yes, of Mullen and Oklahoma, and there's possibly being something there. And for what I can gather, it was.
We might have lost David. We will see if we can't get David back. That was interesting, talking about Dan Mullen potentially being an OC in the Southeastern Conference. Very interesting.
I think he comes off as a pretty headstrong guy, and he's been successful as a head coach, and he was at Mississippi State, and to some extent he was at Florida. But he seems like it's got to be a good mix with his personality. I couldn't see Dan Mullen ever working as an OC under a Nick Saban.
No, I could not. We will try to catch back up with David as the season progresses, but we always appreciate David joining us on the Buyers Ride hotline because he gave us some great information as Florida gets ready to host Ole Miss.
Yeah, for all of your insurance, financial, and HR needs, it's Buyers Right Insurance, a Higginbotham partner.
We're live at Social Taco. We've be here until 2 o'clock. Come by and see us. A couple more folks have stopped by to say hello and get lunch. This is Three Man Front live on Jocks 94.5. You hear that between the third and fourth quarter down in Gainesville. You'll hear it this Saturday as they host the Ole Miss Rebels, a big game. Maybe one of the biggest games in Ole Miss football history, you think about it. They got to keep winning to be in that conversation to potentially play in the college football playoff. Well, you know, it's Black Friday all month long at Courtesy GMC and Trussville. Save up to $15,000 off MSRP on remaining 2024 GMC Sierras in stock. These trucks are the very desirable Elevation Premium with X31 four-wheel drive off-road package. Don't miss these trucks while they last. Courtesy was able to acquire about 40 of these trucks, and they're got less than 12 now, so they're going fast. Don't miss this deal. The 7-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty on all new vehicles at Courtesy GMC. Don't forget about the Yukons, Yukon XLs, $9,000 off MSRP on the 2024s. The 2024 GMC Canyon, 10% off MSRP on 2024 Canyons. That's a sharp, redesigned truck. So go by and see them. That is courtesy GMC in Trussville off of exit 32, courtesybirmingham.com.
We do have action tonight, Pat. Just curious, are you going to tickle your fancy? Do a little Akron at Kent State?
As of this moment, the answer is no.
That's pretty strong when Akron is a 10-point road favorite.
I have not put in. I had a UAB basketball game last night. And
how was the Green and Gold report?
The Green and Gold report was outstanding.
What did we feature?
Let's see here. Last night, what did we feature? We featured
Bowling?
The volleyball team.
Okay.
Going to the AAC volleyball tournament as the 8th seed, taking on the number 1 seed South Florida. Also, the women's basketball team got a big win against Mississippi Valley State. Talked about that. And what else? Yeah, I think that was about it.
Okay, so speaking of the AAC, have you been surprised at the domino effect and how many coaches we've seen fired? Tom Herman, and then we get Biff Poggi, which I never saw that coming from Charlotte. Now, I don't know behind the scenes how he got along with administration. He comes off as a pretty gruff individual where it seems like if you don't like it, screw it. I've got a portfolio and was a hedge fund manager at one time. But Poggi being gone, and it all got started with Mike Houston. Temple, that was not unexpected. Rice, that's been a long time coming. But for Charlotte and FAU in particular to make those moves, does you think is that a one-off and that's just the American, or do you think that we see this trend from other conferences as the season comes to a close?
I think you're going to see a lot of movement in the group of 5, maybe not so much in the Power 4. And the reason why is the Power 4, they're going to fire their coordinators. That's what they're going to do. A lot of money owed to a Brent Venables, to Billy Napier, to a lot of these Power 4 guys, I should say, that these administrations at these colleges are not willing to pull the trigger. They can get rid of some other guys, some assistant coaches where the buyout is not that outrageous to try to kind of, I guess, rearrange the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, so to speak. So I think that's what you're going to get mainly. 1-800-239-WJOX. Let's go out to Colorado. A good listener, faithful listener to the Three-Man Front. Glenn in Colorado joins us on Three-Man Front.
Hey, guys. Good to hear from you.
Glenn, what's happening? How's the weather out there in wonderful Rocky Mountain territory?
Well, I told Molly it's funny, but the wind's kicking in, so it feels like the times I've driven through Nebraska, and I've driven through Nebraska a lot, so it's kind of not pleasant. But it is sunny, and it's almost as cold as Lane Kiffin's Comet. So let me ask you this question. Why would you as a coach, if you had the choice, which sounds like I know what he's trying to say, but to defer going to the SEC championship, because if you win that game, you get that game is indoors, and it's half and half. One half the stadium takes home team, one half the other team, whatever. And the other choice he's trying to make is to forgo that and instead go into a first round and most likely go into someone else's backyard. It's going to be outside, and it could be very, very cold. And I don't understand the concept that how his brain's thinking through this. Because if you go into the SEC championship and win that game, you get a first-round bye, and then you get a home game.
Well, let's just be honest. I think this is what Lane is trying to do. I mean, Lane is very calculated in what he's saying and what he's trying to point out. I think he's trying to dilute the need for an SEC championship game. Why? Because he's not going to play in it. That's why. And he wants to basically say that, hey, look, we don't need this SEC title game anymore because – he wants to up his chances of making it to the CFP because he knows that, let's just say, someone that perhaps he would have the so-called mythical tiebreaker over from a CFP standpoint, if they end up going to Atlanta and winning another big game on the schedule, that could ultimately leave Ole Miss on the outside.
Well, here's his best chance to go in the playoffs. You want to hear it?
Sure.
Auburn fires their coach, and then they hire Coach Prime, and then Kiffin goes out to Colorado. That is his best chance to make the playoffs.
Interesting.
And, yeah, that's the way I see it, because I want to dilute his meaning to the SEC. I know he's fun to watch. So glad he's not at Alabama. Thank you, Burns, for not hiring him. But his best chance is to get out of the SEC and go someplace like BYU or Boise or Colorado, so he can automatically get, one of the Power 5 easily locking whatever it is. And think, too, as a coach, the message he's sending to his team that even next year, hey, guys, you don't have to play for the SEC title game. Just play for the playoffs. Like, what message is that a good message or a bad message to send to his players and to the boosters?
I don't know if it's good or bad. I could totally see Lane Kiffin taking that stance, though, Glenn. I don't think you're off base there. But you think about the games that he lost, and now in retrospect, the loss to Kentucky was horrible at home. You can't explain that one away. And then going to Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, and now an LSU team that could quite possibly finish 7-5. Those are tough, but he needs to, and I'm sure he does, thank his lucky stars that a couple of weeks ago, even 3 weeks ago, we're talking about a Lane Kiffin, because I assumed that Georgia would go in there and win. Lane Kiffin with this roster, the best roster that money could buy, as good as they were at times on the offensive side of the ball, how their schedule was not, in my opinion, as easy as Texas, but it was comparable. It was one of the easier schedules, and they were going to miss out on the college football playoff, much less the SEC championship. Lane Kiffin has dodged another bullet, but let's see if he can finish the season. And Saturday in the Swamp, it is not going to be easy with that early kickoff and going in there as a double-digit favorite right now.
No, it won't. And that comment, I guarantee you, will bite him in the future, maybe next year. Look, that loss to Kentucky, that was bad. Everyone knows it. Look, I'm not happy that Bama went up to Vanderbilt and that half construction built stadium and lost. And that's not a good look at all. And Dart, I've told you guys back in August, Dart is a great quarterback. They should have won every game. So I think what he said is going to bite him. And I would think it'd be okay if they just missed the playoffs. I'd be happy with that. That's just my thoughts.
Well, Glenn, we appreciate the phone call. Glenn, they're in Denver. We'll continue with your phone calls, 800-239-WJOX. Where are you, Pat, the roller coaster of emotions? And in your pocketbook, you donate to the collective, but also your history, your family's history with that program. Are you still waiting for something bad to happen, or are you convinced that Ole Miss is going to be locked in to the college football playoff?
I don't think – I mean, based on what we've seen from the committee, I wouldn't say they're locked in anything. They just have to keep winning. I mean, even if you get out of the Swamp with a 3-point win, I mean, I think that's huge.
We view that win a lot differently now than we did.
Yes. But historically speaking, Ole Miss has had plenty of opportunities in the last 25, 30 years, and they have fallen short every time that they've had that chance. So we'll see what happens.
All right, we'll continue with your phone calls. Let's go to Cowboy. He wants to talk SMU. Cowboy, welcome in.
Welcome. Hey, Pat, how's it going?
Cowboy, it's great to hear from you. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing good, buddy. I got a couple things here.
Sure.
This SMU team reminds me of the 2013 Auburn team with Gus Malzahn. The quarterback's a lot like Dick Marshall. They got a wide receiver a lot like Sammy Coates and a running back a lot like Mason. They ride that thing down the line, and then if they take that, the quarterback kind of around or throw deep. It's a lot like that 2013 Auburn team, and these ACC teams hadn't seen that kind of pace and the way they run it, and they're tough to beat. But Boston College kind of had them in checkmate last Saturday. I was going to go, but then I just didn't end up able to go at the end. But O'Brien, they get a first down at their own 30, and they kind of run the ball some and threw it a little bit, not much. But then they go kind of brain dead. The quarterback, 4 straight plays, won't get rid of the football. One time, if he steps in the pocket and just stands there, he's got a guy wide open down the middle of the field. I think the SMU team can be beaten, but it's going to take a real smart game plan to beat them, to know how to manipulate the clock and keep SMU from that fast pace going.
I was going to ask you, so, I mean, we've seen this offense before with Rhett Lashley, not to mention the fact that, Rhett Lashley was He was the second state championship winning quarterback for Gus Malzahn in high school there in the state of Arkansas. And so obviously, his mantra and what he tries to do is the up-tempo. They tried to do that when they were together at Auburn, but obviously he's brought that to the Metroplex in Dallas, and he's had a great deal of success. I was curious because I was not able to see the game, but you just mentioned it, Cowboy, how I guess BC was able to slow them down offensively, and that's how they kept it close. Is that what happened against BC?
Yeah. That's what they did. But they're tough out. I would say they probably should beat Virginia, and then they got Cal at home. So who knows? But my second and third question, the second one is whoever was on the line before me or one of the hosts, boy, y'all sure are giving Lane Kiffin a hard time. Lane, I like Lane. He's a survivor, man. You got to appreciate a guy like that.
No doubt.
Against Kentucky, I saw the first half at my brother's in Birmingham, and then we went to Tuscaloosa for the Alabama-Georgia game. And the Kentucky defensive front just ate his offensive line's lunch that day. I mean, if y'all want to blame Lane for that, you can. But, I mean, they couldn't block the guys. That was the whole problem. And Lane's got to get that running game going and get that quick downfield throwing going. And when he gets that going, you better watch out. Now, I know everybody wants Florida to beat him Saturday, but I think it's an advantage for Lane, that game being an 11 p.m. kick. That way, sometimes the home team is kind of playing in a funk early in the morning like that. And Florida's feeling good about themselves. If Lane can get that ball and get that pace going quick and hit them and get ahead of them, they'll start questioning things. But now Florida's good on defense. They got the little young guy that looks a lot like Kirby, Austin Armstrong. He GA'd with Kirby, and there was an analysis with Kirby. Then Saban hired him his last year. He's there a month, and then he decided to go be Napier's defensive coordinator once the coordinator they had went to the pros, and he had worked with Napier at Lafayette and that kind of deal. And now, Pat, we're going to – you can talk about Lane in a second. Then I'll bring this up, then I'm going to have to go. The young lady, I heard her on Feinbaum's show. She's a country star from Trussville.
That's right.
And I've been wanting to call you. And she's a Caruth. Now, is that right. Paul Ott's daughter or his granddaughter? Or...
No. That's his
Tell me
niece.
Who's her dad?
Her dad is Bert Caruth, who played secondary. He was a DB at Ole Miss.
Okay, I know who Bert. I met Bert. They own some gas stations in Birmingham.
Bert's brother is Paul Ott Caruth, who played running back at Alabama. Bert played at Ole Miss for Billy Brewer. And Allie Leanne, who you saw on the Feinbaum show, who's an upcoming country star, just an incredible singer.
Boy, she's a pretty girl.
Her brother is Cade Caruth, who is a quarterback on the Alabama football roster. He actually got to play this last Saturday. Yep. So he's on the Alabama roster. So yeah, they're a royalty when it comes to football in the SEC. They've got all sorts of connections at both Ole Miss and Alabama.
Yeah. So Cade is Bert's son.
That's correct.
And that's okay.
And Allie is Cade's sister.
Yeah, I figured Paul Ott's kids would be probably a little older than that. He married that Lindsay that was from Huffman area, I think.
That's all my neck of the woods over there. Yep, sure was.
Yeah.
Well, Cowboy, it's always great to hear from you, man. I hope you're doing well.
And what I said about Kiffin.
Absolutely.
I'll listen.
All right, sounds good, Cowboy.
Good to talk to you, Dave.
Hey, likewise, Cowboy. Take care of yourself. All right, more of your phone calls. They're lining up left and right at 1-800-239-WJOX. As this is Three Man Front. We're live at Social Taco Jocks 94.5. Welcome back to Three Man Front. About 23 minutes before the Paul Feinbaum Show. This is Three Man Front. Pat Smith, Landrum Roberts, Molly Robinson with you. This is not going to come as any surprise to Alabama football fans, as it was reported just a couple weeks ago that Alabama linebacker Keanu Coate, that he was no longer with the team. He has now officially filed paperwork to enter the NCAA transfer portal per his agents. That's right. He's got agents. He will have 2 years of eligibility remaining. He's played in 7 games for Alabama this season. He has 5 tackles and 1 tackle for loss. He played in 14 games in his career from 2022 to 2024. So once again, Alabama linebacker Keanu Coate has filed paperwork to enter the transfer portal.
Well, if you're looking to upgrade and enhance your outdoor living area and landscape, our friends at Second Generation Masonry, the team for beautifying any area. Their expert team crafts durable brick, concrete, and elegant stone creations that elevate any space, from fire pits, maybe an outdoor fireplace, landscape steps, garden walls, stone patios, and walkways to custom driveways. These are your guys. Take your outdoor living area to the next level. Wonderful Alabama-based company, over 2 decades in business. Second Generation Masonry. They also specialize not only in residential work, but also commercial construction as well. Check out some of the completed projects there at the website and get your free quote today, secondgenerationmasonry.com. And as always, make sure you tell them Landrum from Jocks 94.5 sent you.
1-800-239-WJOX. Go to our good friend Hastings, joins us here on Three Man Front. Hey, Hastings.
Yeah, hey guys, great show. Hey, Glenn, stick to Pee Wee. Let the more experienced callers talk playoffs and the SEC matchup, buddy. By the tongue in cheek,
he's a championship-winning coach, Hastings. Come on.
I know. I had to poke a little fun. Actually, I really do enjoy Glenn's calls, but. Actually, with Lane Kiffin's comments, I disagree. I think Lane Kiffin is doing exactly what he needs to do. And I don't really see a huge difference in Lane Kiffin saying we don't need an SEC championship. What's the difference between that and Nick Saban saying it back in 2021 when we losses and we started using Vegas lines to try to get into the playoffs? I think what you do as a coach, first off, you lie about everything, and second off, you try to save your career and get in the playoffs.
Correct.
And what Kiffin is doing is essentially what I would do in his position, and everybody can say that the SEC championship matters. Pat, you brought up yesterday, which was a fantastic point. Who cares if you win the AFC North? Who cares if you win the NFC East? Nobody cares. Just get in the playoffs. So all these coaches, yes, in theory, want to go to the SEC championship and win it because their goal is to win each week. But the end goal is to make it to the dance to where you have an opportunity to play. So, Glenn, I love you, buddy, but I think Lane Kiffin's actually doing the right thing here. And as an Ole Miss fan, I wouldn't expect anything else. Just as an Alabama fan, I expected the same from Nick Saban when we got left out a few years ago. So just kind of my response there. Interesting to hear y'all take. Great show. Hey, I missed y'all at Taco Tuesday, but hopefully we'll catch you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Hastings.
Hastings, thank you so much. No, and Hastings makes a really good point about Lane and his resume, and when it comes down to it, what has this guy actually done? Well, he finally got that elite win, and that was over Georgia at home a couple of weeks ago, right? But this is going to be the criteria moving forward. Who is considered the elite of the elite when it comes to coaches? And now we broaden the spectrum as far as like 5 years from now, 7 years from now. How many college football playoff appearances does he have? Because we do it in college basketball already.
Yeah.
With tournament appearances, and then we go, all right, how many Sweet 16s, how many Elite 8s, and then ultimately the Final Four. So for guys like Lane, and I would say not that he cares, and this year's not a good example, but for guys like Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State and others that have been viewed as falling short. Think about Mark Richt, if he'd have still been around during the expanded college football playoff
that would
era.
be a problem.
How his career might be judged differently where it used to be in the SEC. And I think it still should be, but going to an SEC championship game, winning an SEC championship, because typically that did mean that you were going to be playing for it all, or at least in a 4-team college football playoff. But it's changed now. I think it's problematic for a guy like Brian Kelly, who came to LSU, and now with a 12-team field, he's going to miss the college football playoff. What does that mean for 2025 as far as the hot seat goes? It's changed. But no, you're right, and you made the great point yesterday. Now, if I'm a Braves fan, going back to all the great teams that the Braves had and how many straight division titles, yeah, you clung to that because you didn't have anything else to cling to except for one world championship outside of what we got a couple of years ago, and that coming in 1995.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Gus and Moody on three-man front. Hey, Gus.
Hey, gentlemen, I hope y'all are staying dry.
We
Yes,
are,
sir,
Gus.
we are,
Hope you are,
Gus.
too.
Okay, so I heard you talk about the dude from Alabama transfer.
Yes.
What do you think there's going to come a day with these guys having managers that the manager's going to say, hey, look, I got you a $2.5 million deal, but we need you to leave University A and go to University B because that's what the sponsor wants you to do?
That's a great question.
Yes.
I ultimately think that there's got to be some type of contractual agreement. I know now you're signing letters of intent to go to a school and play football or basketball or whatever sport. I think ultimately you're going to have these lock-solid contracts, employment deals. Maybe it's not with the university. Maybe it's with an NIL collective to where it's got a little bite to it, to where, like, if you were to leave, you sign a 2-year deal, and if you decide, well, I'm going to go in the transfer portal and leave, well, hold on a second. This NIL deal might make you stick around for another year. I think you've got to have something to have a little bit more bite to make these arrangements between the NILs and these schools a little bit more concrete.
But on top of that, Gus and Pat, I think that could also, in some circumstances, be used as leverage by the guy that's being lured away from school B when you're currently at school A, where you can say, yeah, man, everything looks great, but can you guys actually top what I'm currently getting because I'm going to be out $150,000 next season. Can you make it $200,000? Just my worthwhile. My girlfriend's here. Whatever other circumstances they want to use. But to answer your original question, I absolutely believe not only it's going to happen, but it's happening right now.
If you gentlemen don't mind, can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Hey, to Bama hater, look, when Alabama makes it to the playoffs, don't be having dreams or flashbacks to 1993. Roll Tide.
Thank you for the phone call. We've got 15 minutes to go here on Three Man Front. I want to remind everybody about Twin Peaks in Hoover. Just an outstanding place to go catch all the games coming up this weekend. We've, of course, got Thursday night NFL football and so much going on there at Twin Peaks, home of the 29-degree beer. That's right. Goodbye. And Sarah, fine friends there at Twin Peaks in Hoover. More Three Man Front here from Social Taco in Homewood. This is Jocks 94.5. It is 148, Jocks 94.5. The Cowboys lose last night on Monday Night Football. That's not the big story. Most people believe McCarthy is going to be fired, ultimately, Landrum. But how about this little bombshell dropped this morning on the Colin Cowherd radio show? Michael Irvin told Colin Cowherd that Deion Sanders would accept the Cowboys job if offered if they draft Shedeur Sanders.
Okay.
I think Dallas has a quarterback.
They do, but Shedeur Sanders to the Cowboys would not be the wasted draft pick that we got with LeBron and Bronny there with the Lakers. Would you not agree with that? That wouldn't be apples to apples? But, of course, Deion would take that job. Who doesn't want the Cowboys job? Who are you really trying to live up to? Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer, Tom Landry. How many other Cowboys coaches can we talk about that underperformed in the eyes of Cowboys fans and how dreadful they've been since that, I would say, from my time, from my life, the golden age of Cowboy football, and that was when you did have a Jimmy Johnson that took over, Troy Aikman as a quarterback. They went undefeated. I'll never forget that. Back when we had a boatload. What did we have, 5 preseason games back then in the NFL?
I think it was 4.
Was it 4?
I think it was 4.
But then that team ultimately went out and finished 1-15 or something like that, and then where they were. But, yeah, I'd draft Deion. Or I would draft Shedeur for sure. Is Dak Prescott healthy right now?
No, he's not.
What do you think about that? Why not just put – and we haven't heard that from Deion Sanders, but if they go out and they win the Big 12, they get to a college football playoff, wouldn't that be the perfect time for Deion to capitalize on a pro job?
No question. So earlier we were talking about the point spread for Alabama-Auburn. It's already been set for FanDuel. It's got it at 15.5 points. 15.5 points. So I have in front of me now some other lines of some big college football games for next weekend. Ole Miss and Mississippi State. The Rebels are right now a 27.5-point favorite, almost 4 touchdowns over Mississippi State. Georgia is 20.5 over Georgia Tech. Ohio State is 23.5 over Michigan. Oregon is 18.5 over Washington. Notre Dame is 5.5 over Army. That's interesting. Florida is 13.5 favorite over Florida State. Sorry, FSU, Dave. Clemson is minus 2.5.
How many and a half for Florida?
13.5.
Ooh, okay.
Almost 2 touchdowns. Clemson is 2.5 over South Carolina at Clemson. Tennessee is 12.5 over Vandy. And Texas is a 7.5-point favorite against the Aggies of Texas A&M.
Ooh. Give me some of that early action right now. Texas and Texas A&M. Would you not take Texas A&M plus
Absolutely.
the 7.5 at home right now?
Listen, I mean, not that I'm a millionaire when it comes to entertainment purposes only, but I will tell you that if you're gaining a touchdown as a home underdog, I'm typically probably going to take it. And you're going to give me 7.5 with Texas A&M at home at Kyle Field, first time they've played that game in forever. Are you kidding me? I'm loading up on the Aggies. Notre Dame 5.5 against Army.
That's really interesting. Prior to the start of the season, or not the start of the season, during the season, when I looked at that Navy and Army and potentially that Notre Dame matchup, and I called for the upset, or Navy over Notre Dame, and that hasn't happened in Navy. They've fallen significantly since that time. But this Army football team with a healthy quarterback and what they do, which is different on the defensive side of the ball and offensively, and I would have to go back and check these stats, but I told you the crazy stat. We went up to West Point with UAB that I learned with 8 guys in the box, 8 helmets in the box. Army runs it more than any other team in college football. when you're seeing an 8-man box defensively and they know that you're going to run the ball. But they also lead the country, or they did at the time, in yards before contact. They're a problem, especially with Bryson Daly as their quarterback and what they do and just eating up. Because our Navy's a little bit different. They're going to throw the ball more, and they're a little more exotic with their scheme, with Drew Cronick coming in from Mercer and going more RPO and some other things they do out of their traditional look in the option. But Army, that's a football team, plays really well together, and they can shorten the game. And if Notre Dame doesn't bring their A game, they're at a neutral site, Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
That could help shape. Well, does that really shape the picture, or then are we talking about Army taking one of those spots?
Probably Army taking another spot, I would think. But speaking of that, tonight at 6 o'clock, we're going to have, so no more basketball. Remember last week we had to wait for the basketball game to get over with. But tonight at 6 o'clock on ESPN, you're going to get the third edition of the College Football Playoff rankings. We anticipate Oregon's going to be number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3. But then the fun begins with Penn State, Indiana, Notre Dame, Miami, Bama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, Boise State. Where's BYU after they took that loss last week? So a lot of things are going to be decided tonight, at least for this edition. We've still got 2 more weeks of football games to be played, including Championship Saturday. So a lot needs to happen to kind of be settled out, but that's what you're looking at tonight. That will be a 6 o'clock as that will happen on ESPN, as the College Football Playoff Committee will enlighten us once again, Landrum, on what they're thinking in regards to Ward Manuel, the athletics director there at Michigan, and who is the executive director of the committee this year.
Any real surprises? What's the potential surprise that you think we could expect?
It's got to be where Georgia, how much Georgia goes up, in my opinion, and how back does Tennessee fall? You know, like where do those two teams settle out? And then does Ole Miss find itself, you know, ahead of Alabama, possibly? So we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, we'll tune in tonight, and of course, we'll have full reaction coming up tomorrow here on the show as we get started bright and early, 6 a.m. with Morning Jocks, and then McElroy and Kublik in the morning, and then here on 3-Man Front, we're going to have our regular guest. We'll have Brian Edwards tells us where the sharp money is going. His money is going this college football and NFL weekend, as well as voice of the Tide, Chris Stewart, as Alabama gets set to take on the Sooners there in Norman, Oklahoma, and a little way too early Iron Bowl talk as well. We appreciate our friends at Social Taco. Come by and enjoy half-off happy hour just every single day here at Social Taco in the Square next to City Hall in Homewood. Don't forget about the Tapas Bottomless Brunch on Saturday and Sunday. For Conrad Van Order, Molly Robinson, our buddy Pat Smith, I'm Landrum Roberts. Thanks for listening to America's Home for college football and more. Jocks 94.5 and 3-Man Front. Paul Feinbaum is next.